Chapter 466. What do you mean? In tomorrow's match, try to use 3 moves. No, if you can last until 4 moves and then defeat your opponent, that would be the best. Tang 36 moved close to his ear and said, someone placed a heavy bet on the celestial pole market. They bet that if you go on stage tomorrow, you won't use more than 3 moves. Chen Changsheng was surprised and asked, the celestial pole market is the merchant company that has the backing of the Pavilion of Divine Ordnance? Tang 36 nodded. Chen Changsheng asked, won't the Pavilion of Divine Ordnance be angry? Tang 36 looked at him like he was looking at an idiot and said, my family bought the Heavenly Fragrance Market this year. The Celestial Pole Market wants to express their goodwill, so they secretly told me. How else do you think I know? Chen Changsheng was a little surprised and asked, could it be that the 4 great markets have been secretly colluding with each other? Of course. How else can we make money? Isn't this to trick those people? Of course. Aren't those people waiting to be tricked by us when they go on stage? Chen Changsheng was speechless. After a long time, he asked embarrassedly, how many moves? Tang 36 said, 4 moves is enough. Chen Changsheng thought about it and still felt embarrassed. He asked then, how much? Tang 36 looked at him as if he had just discovered this person for the first time. He said, that's good. If you knew, you should have negotiated the price. Chen Changsheng said, when we left Zhou prison, Zhishio said he would increase the price. I think I should pay for it. Tang 36 thought about it and said, that's reasonable. You can have 40% of the total profit. Chen Changsheng thought it was good and agreed. Xian Yuan said, I really don't understand why Zhishio wants so much money from you. Simple children like us from the mountains are satisfied with meat to eat and leather clothing to wear. Tang 36 looked at him and said mockingly, look at your shameless appearance. You still have the nerve to call yourself simple? Xian Yuan was a little angry and said, how am I like what you say? My hometown doesn't have such a sly person like you. Chen Changsheng didn't want to hear Xian Yuan standing on the big banyan tree and shouting that the capital isn't his home and his hometown doesn't have that many people. He quickly said, you really are different from before. Tang 36 heard this and laughed. He said, you see, even Chen Changsheng says that. Xian Yuan felt very wronged. Chen Changsheng patted his waist and comforted him, but it's not your fault. Anyone who stays with someone like Tang Tang for too long will become a little narcissistic and even a little shameless. Tang 36's smile disappeared and he was annoyed. Xian Yuan laughed happily. At this moment, a faint laughter came from the other side of the wall across the lake. Ha ha ha, look, the 3 people on the tree are the 3 heroes of the Tradition Academy. What do you mean by 3 heroes? Little Director Chen and young Master Tang are fine, but how can that fellow who looks like a bear be counted? That person is Xian Yuan Pa? That willow tree was pulled out from the ground by him? Straight up or upside down? This person was like a mountain. How heavy was he? How could the tree bear it? Aren't they worried about it breaking? The trees of the Orthodox Academy are naturally not ordinary trees. Chen Changsheng and the other 2 were speechless. This was not the first time something like this had happened. Recently, there were too many people who came to the Tradition Academy to watch the fun, especially the tourists from other counties. They didn't know the rules of the capital and sneaked to the backyard without being noticed by the Li Palace clergy and the Tradition cavalry. Seeing the wall, of course they wanted to see what the Tradition Academy looked like behind the wall, so they began to climb over the wall. The laughter and chatter on the other side of the lake suddenly stopped. Only the sound of hooves and shouting could be heard. It seemed that the tourists were already under the control of the Tradition cavalry. The Tradition Academy returned to its silence, but the 3 suddenly lost interest in talking. I don't like my life these days, Chen Changsheng said. He had been cultivating since he was a child. What he cultivated was to follow his heart and pursue the path of immortality. Naturally, he liked peace. Although Tang 36 and Xian Yuanpo were at the age where they liked crowds, they also felt annoyed. The recent days were too busy, even to the point where they couldn't stand it anymore. Tang 36 looked at him and shook his head. I told you to hit harder, but you still didn't listen. The first time he represented Orthodox Academy in battle, he cut off the hand of the instructor from Li Palace College with a single strike. But after that, under Chen Changsheng's request, he became much gentler in his attacks. Looking at the silent Chen Changsheng, he continued, "If you really agree with what I said, killing a few people can definitely alleviate the current situation. You won't kill them, and you won't let me kill them. What's there to be afraid of? They'll naturally come one after the other. Isn't the Tianhai family just trying to see us run for our lives?" Chen Changsheng said, "But don't you think that if we keep fighting like this, it will actually help us grow?" Tang 36 said, "If you want to understand it that way, it's not wrong. But you said it yourself before, you don't like this kind of life." Chen Changsheng looked into his eyes and said, "A few days ago you said that if you couldn't solve these problems, you would change your name." Tang 36 was somewhat annoyed and didn't try to persuade him anymore. Thinking about what Chen Changsheng had said before, after a moment of silence, he shook his head and said, "There really are some problems. His Holiness, the Pope, has never cared about this matter. We should study it." Chen Changsheng said, "There's one more thing I want you to study for me." "What thing?" "Is Mu Laoban's clothes really the legendary 6 protections divine armor?" After the battle, Tang 36 had told him his conjecture. Hearing Chen Changsheng's question, he said, "If there's nothing unexpected, it should be like this." Chen Changsheng was silent for a while, then said, "How can I get that 6 protections divine armor?" When speaking of this conjecture, Tang 36 had naturally introduced the 6 protections divine armor to him. It was originally a treasure of the Wang family of Tianliang. Later on, it was forcefully taken into the palace by the imperial court, and now it was in the hands of the Tianhai family. Tang 36 looked at him in confusion and asked, "What do you want to do?" "I want to return it to Wang Pa." Chen Changsheng said, "Thank him for his help in Xuanyang City." Tang 36 somewhat unhappily said, "I've helped you so much. So why haven't you thought of giving me anything?" Unhappiness, anger, resentment, the desire to kill, these are the emotions that most easily arise after being bullied and provoked. Tianhai Chengwu stood by the railing and gazed at the misty surface of the lake. He sighed, "I just want to see Chen Changsheng kill people, whether he was forced or the result of an impulse. As long as he kills people, it's fine. If he constantly kills people, his hands will be stained with blood, and he'll become a person like Suli. Then what right will he have to contend with our people? What chance will he have of becoming the next pope? Who could have imagined that at such a young age, with such formidable strength and fortuitous encounters, he would still be able to perfectly control his own mind? Even now, he still hasn't killed a single person." He turned to the person by the table and said, "I'm very curious. What do you think of him?" The next chapter is at night. In addition, I've begun to prepare the draft for posting. I feel very nervous, very fresh. I've only done this twice before, so I'm very worried that I might make a mistake. Chapter 467. The railing was the restaurant's railing, and the table was a table for wine. The restaurant was the capital's most famous and most expensive Clear Lake restaurant, so it was naturally used for eating. There were very few people qualified to eat with Tianhai Chengwu, and Su Shiji just so happened to be one of them. As Chen Changsheng's future father-in-law in name, and at the same time known to the entire world, he currently had a very complex view of Chen Changsheng. Last year, the divine general of the East Estate, because of this young Taoist from the countryside, had been dejected and disgraced, becoming the laughingstock of the entire continent. But how could he have known that Chen Changsheng was the Pope's favored successor? And how could he have known that Taoist Ji was actually the once incomparably glorious Principal Shang? Every time he thought of this engagement, he would feel many complaints towards his father, who who had long since returned to the Sea of Stars. There were clearly so many things hidden behind this engagement. So why didn't you explain it clearly to me beforehand? His feelings were complex, and his thoughts were naturally complex as well. Su Shirji's attitude towards this engagement had also become somewhat difficult to grasp. When he received the invitation from the Tianhai estate yesterday, he thought that this Tianhai clan head famed for his deep foresight might be trying to force him to take a stand. As a result, after arriving at Clear Lake Restaurant, he had basically maintained his silence, especially when Tianhai Chenwu spoke of Qin Changsheng. Tianhai Chenwu smiled at him, as if he completely understood his thoughts. He indifferently continued, Xing Xue is diligently cultivating in the north, using battle to improve himself. He has already broken into star condensation, and after the new year he should return to the capital to view the heavenly tome monoliths. Su Shirji did not know why he would suddenly mention Tianhai Xing Xue, even though Tianhai Xing Xue was the most outstanding youth of the Tianhai clan's third generation and one of the juniors the divine empress most admired. In the grand examination at the beginning of the year, Xing Xue's actions could not be hidden from anyone, but this child is an intelligent person and did not try to hide it from anyone. Now that I think about it, this can be considered a rather good use of open schemes, but I'm still rather unhappy that he acted on his own. If a family is too big, the people inside will inevitably have their own judgments and opinions. However, if the family is facing pressure, those individual opinions are meaningless. We must gather all our strength together to ensure that the whole family continues to walk on the right path. As the saying goes, when the nest is overturned, even the nest can't be kept, and you still want to keep your egg. Isn't that very funny? Hearing Tianhai Chenwu's seemingly relaxed and joking words, Su Shirji's mood became even heavier. How could he not understand the hidden meaning of these words? The so-called correct path was, of course, the Tianhai clan replacing the Qin clan and continuing to rule over the human world. The so-called dissatisfaction towards Tianhai Xing Xue was, of course, a warning to him not to have too many other thoughts, and hasn't said much recently, so a lot of people in the capital have misunderstood. Whether in the imperial palace or the imperial court, when Tianhai Chenwu mentioned the divine empress, he would always use honorifics. Only in extremely private places would he refer to her as aunt. This was not some hidden hint, but a naked display of strength. He turned and stared into Su Shirji's eyes, saying, "But they forgot one thing. Aunt's surname is Tianhai after all. Could she bear to see everyone in her family die?" Su Shirji knew that he could not continue listening, so he said, "I don't understand why His Holiness the Pope has also maintained his silence." This was obviously referring to the most popular event in the capital recently, the battle between the Tradition Academy and the other schools. Tianhai Chenwu's smile disappeared, and he said, "When everyone doesn't understand, then there must be a deeper meaning. I always feel that His Holiness is using this method to make Qin Changsheng mature faster. Sometimes I even feel that His Holiness is pulling up seedlings to help them mature faster." Su Shirji frowned slightly, thinking that his cheap son-in-law was publicly known to be calm and mature early. Not even 16 years old, he was already close to reaching the threshold of the star fusion realm. This was even more unprecedented. Other than his precious daughter, no one could compare to him. Yet His Holiness was still not satisfied and wanted him to mature faster? Other than aunt, who can understand His Holiness's intentions? Tianhai Chenwu turned his head to look at the mist on the surface of the lake and said slowly. Su Shirji was even more confused, thinking that if His Holiness wanted to use the Tianhai clan and the Orthodoxy's new power to train Qin Changsheng, then why didn't the Tianhai clan use their true methods? Starting from Mei Li Sha until now, Li Palace has always been building up momentum for Qin Changsheng. If I want to go against the momentum, I need to spend too much effort. So why don't I go with the momentum? I will send people to continuously challenge the Tradition Academy. If Qin Changsheng can endure this period of time, then whether it is his strength, level, or willpower, they will all be greatly improved. But what if he can endure? A mocking smile appeared on Tian Hai-Chenwu's face, and he said, I know what you are thinking, and what many people are thinking. You think that my Tian Hai clan continuously sending people to challenge the Tradition Academy is like sending sacrifices to Qinchangshan. It is like continuously adding firewood to a bonfire. There is no way to extinguish it, but instead it will make the fire burn more and more fiercely. But have you ever thought if one day a large tree suddenly falls down, will this fire continue to burn? Or perhaps there is suddenly no more firewood to add to it. This fire that has been burning so fiercely for such a long time, how long will it take for it to extinguish? Or will it burn the forest behind it? Since Lipalis wants to create momentum, I'll help them push this momentum to the highest point, then I'll have them collapse. At that time, I'd like to see how Chen Changsheng will be able to withstand such a fall, and whether or not his holiness tempering will directly grind him into a pile of sand. Su Shiji slightly raised his eyebrows and said, adding oil to a raging fire, in the end, it will indeed have a miserable ending. But if we really do use experts in the end, I'm afraid that Lipalis will come out and stop us. Tian Hai-Chenwu glanced at him and thought with slight mockery, even at this point, you are still so fake. I don't know why my aunt chose you in the first place. There is one person that can definitely defeat Qin Changsheng, and not even His Holiness can find a single flaw in her because she is younger than Qin Changsheng and has also not yet reached star condensation. He looked at Su Shiji and indifferently said, in a few days, your family's phoenix child will return to the capital. The entire world knows of my aunt's love for your family's phoenix. If Lipalis wants to build up momentum for Chen Changsheng, why can't we build up momentum for your family's phoenix child? Su Shiji knew that today's conversation had finally reached its most crucial moment. After a long period of silence, he said, in the end, she is still young. How can she bear the burden of the aftermath? Stopping the momentum of the Orthodox Academy's revival, even using it to bring Chen Changsheng's path to the Pope to a sudden halt, to that genius daughter of his, was not a big deal. The problem was, behind the storm of the Orthodox Academy was the struggle of two saints. Even if Su Yurong was the reincarnation of the heavenly phoenix, she was still not of age, so how could she bear the storm? You have to understand one thing. From Zhou Tong to many other people, it seems like they haven't done anything in the last few days, but in reality they have always been cooperating with that saint of the south. Tian Hai-Chenwu gazed at the vast and misty surface of the lake and thought of that matter. Even someone of high authority and callous temperament like him could not help but yearn for it. He sighed. This year the confluence of the north and south really does have a chance of succeeding. It is precisely against this background that the Pope and my aunt have appeared so calm. The two sides can only struggle for power, but it is not convenient for them to carry it out. So you don't need to worry too much. The banquet was dismissed, and they descended the stairs. People of status like Tian Hai-Chenwu and Su Shiji naturally did not take the path that ordinary guests took, but a special path that Clear Lake Restaurant had left behind. No one had expected that in a path that was logically impossible for two groups of guests to meet, two groups of guests really did meet today. Tian Hai-Chenwu and Su Shiji bumped into three young people from the Orthodox Academy. Chapter 468. The first person Chen Changsheng saw was Su Shiji. That stern and cold face instantly reminded him of the silhouette in a carriage outside of the Heavenly Academy last year. Then he noticed the middle-aged man walking in front of Su Shiji. The middle-aged man had a heroic appearance and looked familiar. Chen Changsheng didn't know who this person was, but from the position of the two people, he could guess that this person's status must be very high. He bowed to Su Shiji. Because he was a junior, this was a necessary etiquette. He didn't speak first because it was also etiquette, and he really didn't know what to say to him. Although after the great trial, Su Shirji's attitude towards him obviously changed, and he even invited him to eat a normal family dinner in the Dongyu general's mansion. The family dinner didn't end very happily. The journey of that marriage letter still hadn't reached the end yet. When he straightened up, he noticed that Tang 36 was bowing to the other middle-aged man. This was a very rare thing, because Tang 36 was a person who did not pay much attention to etiquette. To be more precise, he despised those who were overly formal in the world. Back then, even in front of Archbishop Mei Lisha, he had not been so polite. Tian Haichingwu looked at Tang 36 and asked, "How is your grandpa?" With the status and position of the master of Tian Hai family, there weren't many people in the world that needed him to greet. Even in the Wen Shui Tang family, only the old master had the right to greet him. Tang 36 smiled and replied, "His body is very good. My family sent me a letter saying that he still eats 4 bowls of rice per meal, and he eats at night every day." When he was talking, he was very obedient, especially like a sensible junior. He didn't have his usual arrogance at all. Qin Chongsheng was even more surprised. He thought to himself, who was this middle-aged man? Su Shirji said to him, "In a few days, Rong, I will return to the capital. Find time to eat at our mansion." Hearing this, the hallway instantly became very quiet. Tian Haichengwu looked at Su Shirji and slowly squinted his eyes. Qin Chongsheng now knew that Su Yurong was going back to the capital. After a moment of silence, he looked at Su Shirji and responded politely, "You know that the Tradition Academy has been busy recently. I'm not sure if there will be time." From the moment Su Shirji said this, Tang 36's eyes kept moving back and forth between Su Shirji and Tian Haichengwu, trying to find something. Tian Haichengwu suddenly laughed, then slowly stopped. He looked at Qin Chongsheng and said, "Since you have so many things to do, you still have the leisure to eat here?" It was just a simple question, but Qin Chongsheng felt an extremely powerful pressure, especially the coldness in his voice, as if it was about to freeze his Dao heart. It was at this moment that Tang 36's characteristic and particularly roguish voice rang out at just the right time. "I hear that you like eating at Clear Lake Restaurant the most." He was asking Tian Haichengwu. Tian Haichengwu quietly looked at Qin Chongsheng, ignoring him. Tang 36 did not feel awkward. He smiled and continued, "A few days ago in the battle between Qin Chongsheng and Zhou Ziheng, I earned quite a bit of silver. Pooling from here and there, I gathered enough silver to buy this building. Today, we're here to buy the building. Starting tomorrow, Clear Lake Restaurant will have to close for business and refurbish. You might not be able to eat blue lobster for the next few days." Tian Haichengwu looked at him and mocked. The temper of a child. Tang 36 smiled and said, "I just want to tell you that in a few days, when the air is clear and the air is clear and the crab season's coming, this restaurant might not be able to open in time. I might have to have the steward of the estate find a better place." Tian Haichengwu looked at him and said, "In these past few years, fewer and fewer people have dared to provoke me to my face. As expected of the Tang old master's favorite only grandson, your courage truly stands out from the masses." Tang 36 opened his eyes wide and pretended to be innocent. "I don't really understand what sir means." Tian Haichengwu laughed and sighed. "I originally just wanted the Orthodox Academy to liven up a bit, but now it seems that you'll have to suffer a bit." After saying this, he walked forward. The passage was not narrow, but it was not wide either, especially with Xian Yuan Po's mountainous body in the middle. Tian Haichengwu walked forward, and the 3 youths of the Orthodox Academy wanted to make way. Xian Yuan could already sense that the atmosphere was rather tense and strange. Seeing his opponent walk over, he was very angry and prepared to use his own body to welcome him. However, this was not a quarrel between the children of the Bear tribe, nor was it a game between fellow students of the Orthodox Academy. Tang 36's expression froze. Quick as lightning, He grabbed Xian Yuan Po's belt. True essence exploded out, and he forcefully pushed Xian Yuan Po against the wall. With a boom, the wall collapsed from Xian Yuan Po's impact, dust rising into the air. Chen Changsheng had long sensed that there was something off about this middle-aged man. The moment Tang 36 turned to avoid him, he had already retreated to the side. Just like that, Tian Hai Changwu held his hands behind his back and expressionlessly walked over. Su Shiji glanced at Qin Changsheng and also left. "What's wrong with you?" Xian Yuan sat on the rubble on the ground, confused and angry. He didn't understand why Tang 36 would suddenly attack him. Suddenly, he realized that neither Tang 36 nor Qin Changsheng were paying attention to him. He subconsciously turned his head and saw that behind him were 10 odd tables, all filled with people. As it turned out, on the other side of the wall was the hall of the first floor of Clear Lake Restaurant. They had smashed through the wall, which meant that they had arrived at the hall. The restaurant, that should have been bustling with noise and excitement, seemed even quieter than the imperial palace. Countless gazes fell upon Chen Changsheng's group of 3. Those who had the right and money to eat at Clear Lake Restaurant were not normal people. Many were officials of the court, bishops of the Li Palace, and even the most inconspicuous were young talents with a reputation. The Orthodox Academy was currently very famous in the capital, so they naturally recognized Chen Changsheng's group. Previously, when the wall collapsed, many people had seen the side of Tian Hai Cheng Wu's face. Even earlier, some people had even faintly heard the sounds of dispute on the other side. No one knew exactly what had happened, but what was certain was that Chen Changsheng's group had some conflict with that important personage who had already left. That was not a normal personage, but the head of the Tian Hai family. Whether it was Prime Minister Jing or the 6 ministers, whether it was the 6 prefects of the Orthodoxy or the headmasters of the Ivy Academies, none could compare to that person's overwhelming power and influence in the Zhou dynasty. After the incident, Qin Changsheng's group of 3 were actually unharmed. That Bear tribe youth called Xian Yuan was in a rather sorry state, but he actually didn't die. After such a thing had happened, for such an ending to occur, how could the people in the restaurant not be shocked? How could they not be quiet? "Everyone, it's fine, it's fine." Without waiting for the head manager from the story to appear as usual, Tang 36, very self-conscious of being the new owner of Clear Lake Restaurant, clasped his hands in front of him, smiled, and said, "Continue eating. I won't give you guys a free bill." Finished speaking, he brought Qin Changsheng and Xian Yuan Po upstairs. It was at this moment that a person who had previously faintly heard the contents of the conversation in the other corridor, and was obviously a busybody, stood up and asked, "Young Master Tang, could it be that Clear Lake Restaurant is really going to close?" Tang 36 halted his steps, stood on the stairs, and turned his head to look at the people in the restaurant. He said, "It really is so." Countless discussions arose in the main hall of Clear Lake Restaurant, and someone else asked, "It's almost time for the fat crab. Aren't you going to worry us to death?" Someone else asked, "Young Master Tang, even if you're preparing to close down for renovation, you still have to find a time, right? When will the grand plan open?" Tang 36 looked at the crowd and revealed a meaningful smile. He said, "That mainly depends on when I have the time to come and take care of business." Hearing these words and thinking about the hidden meaning, the restaurant burst into an uproar. Everyone now knew that Tang 36 was a student of the Orthodox Academy. The so-called when he had the time mainly depended on when he was in the mood, and when his mood was good was obviously when the Orthodox Academy was not in trouble. Clear Lake Restaurant was the most profitable restaurant in the capital, and at the same time it was also the most expensive restaurant. Saying that it made money every day was not enough to describe the speed at which this restaurant by the lake made money. In order to prevent that important personage from the Tian Hai clan from eating blue lobster and autumn crab, Tang 36 was actually willing to spend so much money to close down for such a long time. The crowd couldn't help but be shocked speechless, thinking that he really was worthy of being the sole grandson of the Wunshui Tangs. He was truly willful to the extreme. The only table by the railing on the top floor had long since been cleaned. 10 odd refreshing fruit and vegetable dishes were placed on it, and there were also 3 kinds of clear tea that could be freely enjoyed. Xian Yuanpa did not have this kind of life experience. Looking at those precious porcelains produced from famous kilns, he felt that they were rather troublesome. He thought, what if I accidentally crush them? They're so white. What if I accidentally dirty them? Aren't you a bit too willful? Chun Chongsheng looked at Tang 36 and shook his head. Tang 36 sneered and said, that old guy loves to eat Clear Lake restaurant's blue lobster the most. The problem is he made me feel bad, so why should I make him feel good? Chun Chongsheng said, that doesn't mean you don't treat silver as silver. Tang 36 said, I'm relatively rich. He said these words very calmly, very indifferently, without any intention of boasting. He was just explaining. Only this way could make Qin Chongsheng speechless. At the same time, he remembered last year at the Plum Garden Inn, when he invited Tang 36 to eat for the first time. He also remembered when Tang 36 said that he and Su Yurong were friends that made people speechless. He couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. Right, that person, just who is he? Only now did he remember this important question. Tianhai Qingwu, the current head of the clan. Tang 36 said, the Divine Empress's nephew. In other words, if the Empress doesn't want to return the throne to the Imperial Qin clan, he is the most likely to become the next emperor of the Great Zhou. Only now did Chun Chongsheng know that it was actually this important figure. Xian Yuanpa woke up from the shock of the luxurious furnishings in the top floor. He thought about what Tang 36 did on the first floor and complained, why did you stop me just now? Are you afraid of him? Tang 36 said mockingly, I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid that if you don't move, you will be beaten to death on the spot. Xian Yuanpa was not convinced and said, with his thin and weak appearance, I can easily knock into him 3 times. Tang 36 sneered and said, the great Zhou dynasty has a few elites at the peak of star condensation. Do you think he will be knocked over by you? Do you think he is one of those trees by the lake that a black bear like you can knock into? Xian Yuanpa was stunned. He never would have thought that the seemingly ordinary middle-aged man was actually an elite at the peak of star condensation. Chun Chongsheng thought back to the scene in the other path, especially Tian Haiqing Wu's expression at the time. He suddenly felt that the lake wind blowing in from outside the building had become extremely cold. This was because he felt a chill in his heart. This head of the Tian Hai family really wanted to kill at that time. The next chapter is at night. How about this? I am now a person who has saved up manuscripts. Basically, before the 25th, I can guarantee 2 chapters. That is 1 chapter in the afternoon and 1 chapter in the evening. If I want to do 3 chapters, I will report to everyone after the 2nd chapter. This way, I won't have to say a few words every day and affect everyone's reading. See you tonight. Chapter 469. If the 3 of them had not given way, Tianhai Qingwu might have given the Pope and the Tang Old Master face and casually taught him and Tang 36 a lesson. But what if the one blocking the way was Xian Yuanpa? One had to know that for a great figure like him, Xian Yuanpa's life was no different from that of an ant. Chun Chongsheng quickly came to a conclusion. If Tang 36 didn't push Xian Yuanpa against the wall, Tian Haiqing Wu definitely wouldn't mind killing Xian Yuanpa. He was a peak star condensation expert. With just a casual move, Xian Yuanpa would die from broken bones. Even now, Chun Chongsheng could not forget the terror he had felt in Xuanyang City when he faced Liang Wangsuin's Vajra pestle, especially painted armor Xiao Zhang's terrifying spear. On the other hand, Tian Haiqinwu was clearly stronger, fiercer, and more ruthless than Liang Wangsun and Xiao Zhang in both cultivation and killing intent. Most importantly, he was the head of the Tianhai clan, other than people like Qin Changsheng and Tang 36, who had extremely powerful backgrounds. He didn't mind killing a normal person like Xian Yuanpa in the entire continent who would dare to say a word. Even the White Emperor couple did not know how to speak. After a while, Qin Changsheng finally got rid of the coldness in his heart. He looked at Tang 36 and asked seriously, "Didn't you always show disdain towards the Tianhai family?" Tang 36's face was a bit ugly. He said, "I was talking about my grandfather. When did I talk about myself?" Qin Changsheng thought for a while and said, "Last year, when official Jean invited us to barbecue for the second time, you said it. Later, when you saw Tian Haixing Shui in the Great Trial, you also said it, and then—" "All right, hurry up and stop. What's so important that it's worth you using the energy you use to comprehend the heavenly tome, monoliths, to remember?" Tang 36 angrily said. Xian Yuanpa looked at him and mocked. "You only know how to bully me. In front of these big shots, you don't have any backbone at all." Tang 36 was enraged and said, "You guys understand, that is the master of the Tianhai clan. Not any random Tom, Dick, or Harry. Besides, which part of me isn't tough? Didn't you hear what that old man said before he left? For so many years, no one dared to provoke him. So, who is the one provoking him now? Who is it that prevented him from eating autumn crabs and blue-blooded lobsters? Say it." At this moment, there was the sound of hurried footsteps on the stairs. The one who had come was not today's official guest, but a priest of the Li Palace stationed in the Orthodox Academy. Tang 36's expression turned cold. He looked at the priest and asked, "What happened?" The Li Palace clergyman gave him a somewhat complicated glance and asked, "I heard that you previously contradicted the Tianhai clan head with a few words." In Tang 36's words, this was a provocation, but in the eyes of the great powers of the capital, he was only a junior of the Winshui Tangs, and Tian Haiqingwu was the absolute senior. So this was a provocation. Of course, using the word contradict from a certain point of view was also for Tang 36. "Just say what it is," Tang 36 said impatiently. The Li Palace clergyman didn't say anything. He directly took out a thick stack of letters and placed it on the table. He then looked towards Qin Changsheng and said, "Principal Qin, please have a look." After saying this, he left. Qin Changsheng took the letters and opened them one by one. It was unusually quiet in the lake house. Tang 36 and Xian Yuanpa's gazes were fixed on the letters. In truth, they had already guessed at what was in these letters, because in the past 20-some days, the Orthodox Academy had received many of these letters. Just as expected, the letters were letters of challenge. There were a total of 40 or so letters of challenge. Qin Changsheng only skimmed through them. He didn't look at who came to challenge the Orthodox Academy. He just felt that these letters of challenge were a bit heavy. Before Tian Haichengwu left, he said that previously he only wanted to have some fun, but now he wanted the Orthodox Academy to suffer. And the suffering would come soon. How long had it been since the conflict in the other path? So many letters of challenge were sent over. Qin Changsheng could even see that countless letters of challenge were flying into the Orthodox Academy like snowflakes. 12 consecutive victories? 20 or so consecutive victories. What's the use of that? What's the point? Countless elites could easily drown the entire Orthodox Academy. No wonder they were the #1 aristocratic family in the human world. The family of Tianhai was too scary, not to mention the Orthodox Academy. Even the Li Palace would have a hard time dealing with them. If you don't let others eat lobster, then others will make us suffer. Qin Changsheng looked at Tang 36, sighed, and said, "Back then, you said you wanted to drown them. Now we're about to be drowned. What do we do?" Before he finished speaking, the sound of hurried footsteps came from the stairwell. The bead curtain was lifted up, followed by a crisp crash, and then a voice as clear as a silver bell. It had been a few days since he last heard such a sound. In the scorching summer, The top floor of Clear Lake Restaurant by the lake was the most refreshing and pleasant place in the capital. It was the most comfortable place in the capital, so only important figures like Tian Hai Ching-Wu and the new owner, Tang 36, could enter the restaurant. At this time, the little girl who came before Qin Changsheng was even cooler and more refreshing than the lake breeze. Luo Luo looked at him and giggled. Looking at her clear and childish eyes, Qin Changsheng instantly forgot about his worries. He smiled and said, "What are you giggling about?" Luo Luo said confidently, "It's been too long since I've seen Master, and without Master's teachings, it's hard to avoid becoming a bit stupid." This sentence was not stupid at all, but it contained a hint of unhappiness. Qin Changsheng was not stupid either, so he could tell, so he could only play dumb. If it was in the past, Xian Yuanpo would have knelt down on one knee in front of Luo Luo to pay his respects, and Tang 36 would have ridiculed the two of them with jealousy. But at this time, the restaurant was very quiet. Xian Yuanpe and Tang 36 looked at the thick stack of challenge letters on the table and felt a bit dazed. They thought about how they would have to fight nonstop every day, and they probably wouldn't even have time to eat or go to the toilet. They felt very miserable. Luo Luo finally noticed the strangeness of the two and asked curiously, "What happened?" Tang 36 finally came to his senses and looked at Luo Luo. His eyes became extremely bright, and he said, "Your Highness, how could Qin Changsheng not know what he was planning?" He walked up to the table and threw the challenge letters into Tang 36's arms. At the same time, he blocked Luo Luo's sight and said, "Serve the dishes." Luo Luo curiously poked her head out from behind Qin Changsheng and looked at Tang 36. She asked, "What's wrong?" Tang 36 looked into Qin Changsheng's eyes and understood that if he really asked Luo Luo for help, his days after returning to the Orthodox Academy would definitely be even more miserable than if he had to bear these challenges alone. So he very firmly and naturally changed the topic and said, "Clear Lake Restaurant is going to close from tomorrow onwards. Let's eat all the blue lobsters they've stored. The murder hasn't happened yet." I suddenly remembered that Huji's video was already N years ago. Oh, time, slow down. Time is like water. Drowning people doesn't pay for it. Time is like a knife. Every knife sees blood, so we need to live more comfortably. A few days ago, on May 12th, I posted on Weibo and WeChat. This is roughly what I meant. Chapter 470. Today's banquet was mainly for Luo Luo, but in order to give her a reason to leave the imperial palace, they also invited some guests to accompany her, such as Prince Chenlu, Mao Qiuyu, and Priest Exan. When drafting the name list, Qin Changsheng didn't care about the differences in status and sensitivities. He only wanted to thank those who had once helped the Tradition Academy. Prince Chenlu came, but Mao Qiuyu didn't come. Priest Exan came, but when he saw the people in the field, he thought about his status and left first after leaving a gift. He received praise from Tang 36 and confusion from Xian Yuanpe. Delicious food, clear plum wine, the lake breeze, and young people. Prince Chenlu was the least familiar with the group, but as expected of the only member of the royal family who could survive in the capital until now, and the only junior who could be appreciated by the divine queen, his words and actions were extremely calm and natural. It didn't take long for him to become familiar with Qin Changsheng. After the last dish was served, he thought of the rumors he heard on the way here and asked with uncertainty, "Is that true?" "What is it?" Luo Luo asked curiously. Prince Chen Lu recounted what had happened at Clear Lake Restaurant earlier, and also mentioned what had happened afterwards. Qin Changsheng saw that he couldn't hide it anymore. He signaled Tang 36 to take out the challenge letters and said, "I feel like it's a bit childish." Prince Chen Lu looked at those letters of challenge and shook his head, saying, "The little tricks of the big shots often have deep meanings. What do you need my help with?" Qin Changsheng thought it over, then said, "After all, this is a matter of the Orthodox Academy. We'll deal with it ourselves first. If it really doesn't work, then we might as well go to the Li Palace and request an audience with His Holiness." Luo Luo glanced at Qin Changsheng. Qin Changsheng picked up a piece of fermented bean curd with his chopsticks and placed it on her plate. Luo Luo understood and thanked him softly. She lowered her head and continued eating without saying a word. Teacher, why have so many things happened in the Orthodox Academy? Why haven't you told me? Are you used to living in the palace? Oh, I forgot. When you first came to the capital, you lived in the palace. Sir, is that Zhou Ziheng really at the star condensation realm? Sir, did you really kill him with just one strike? Speaking of which, why is official Jean unwilling to enter the council? Just because he doesn't like those orthodoxy cavalry outside? Sir, is that guy Tang Tang really that strong now? What kind of person do you think Prince Chenlu is? I think it's not bad, but, I don't have many friends, and I don't know how to judge people. Sir, could it be that Tang Tang is stronger than me now? Probably not. Since he was able to win 12 matches in a row, if I were to represent the Orthodox Academy, would I be able to win continuously? I don't know why, but Tang 36 never liked him. Of course, it wasn't because they didn't agree with each other, nor was he intentionally avoiding the topic. Although at the very beginning, Chen Changsheng indeed thought this way. Later on, he only felt that it was very interesting. Before entering the mausoleum of books, especially before Xian Yuan Pa and Tang 36 had entered the Orthodox Academy, this incomparably vast academy, which occupied 1,000 mu of land, only had him and Luo Luo. At that time, when they were strolling by the lake in the evening or staring blankly at the great banyan tree, they would also do these interesting things. Qin Changsheng looked at the golden waves on the surface of the lake and the distant Li Palace. He reached out and rubbed Luo Luo's head. When he did this action, he didn't even glance at Luo Luo. His hand accurately fell on her head, because he had done this action many times, and Luo Luo would always sit in the same position. On the night that Mei Li Sha returned to the Sea of Stars, they had actually already foreseen the current situation. The last time they met, they had already discussed this matter. Everyone had their own responsibilities, and the most troublesome thing was that everyone would never have a choice. Everyone had their own family, friends, classmates, teachers, and even the inheritance of the country. Therefore, you would never be able to make a choice or decision by yourself. You always had to consider the things in front of you, and also the things in the future. I will never shirk my responsibilities. Luo Luo struggled out from under his hand, stood up, and looked towards the direction of Li Palace with him. She said, "But why have you never thought that, as a student of the Orthodox Academy, I also need to bear the responsibilities here? Because, first and foremost, you are your father's most treasured daughter. You are the princess who is loved by countless Yao in the 800 li of the Red River." Chen Changsheng looked at her and said, "As for the Orthodox Academy, there's me and Tang 36 here. You don't have to worry about anything." After returning from Xuanyang City, he realized that the situation in the capital was extremely tense. The Tianhai Divine Empress and the Pope had begun to display their strength, and many people were beginning to be forced to take sides. He did not let Luo Luo manage the affairs of the Orthodox Academy, precisely because he did not want Luo Luo to take a side. Because from a certain perspective, Luo Luo represented the attitude of the entire demi-human race. But Luo Luo lowered her head to look at the shadows of the great banyan tree in the lake and her and Qin Changsheng's shadows. "I'm very sad." Qin Changsheng comforted. "After a while, if the situation becomes a little clearer, perhaps it won't be so sensitive anymore." After all, he was a youth from Xining village. How could he understand that once this sort of thing started, it would never end? Luo Luo was a princess from White Emperor City, so she naturally understood. So she became even sadder. Seeing her appearance, Chen Changsheng couldn't bear it and changed the topic. "A few nights ago, Zhixiu and the others all chose a sword. You also chose one." "Yes, there are still many good swords." He thought that every person in the Orthodox Academy had a sword that had returned from the sword pool, and Luo was naturally no exception. Moreover, if she thought that this was the privilege of being a student of the Orthodox Academy, perhaps she would feel happy. As for what sword Luo would choose, he didn't really care. The reason why he didn't easily agree to Mou's request for the Yu Maiden's sword, other than the fact that he really didn't think he had any obligation to give it to her, was mainly because Luo hadn't chosen one yet. Swords like the Yu Maiden sword and the Flowing Light sword were more feminine, so he had to keep them for her first. If she didn't want them, then he would deal with them. Indeed, when she heard that every person in the Orthodox Academy had a sword from the sword pool, Luo became a little happier, but she didn't immediately choose a sword. She only told Chen Changsheng to first take care of it and then think about it later. Chen Changsheng looked at the falling rain whip tied to her waist and suddenly thought that she was a princess of the demi-humans. She even had 10,000 Li buttons, and she also had the falling rain whip and the Emperor's tusk, divine weapons on the tier of legendary weapons. She probably wasn't interested in those famous swords of the past. Yes, I also prepared a small gift for you, if, in the end, I can get my hands on it. Chen Changsheng looked at her and said, he thought that if he really could enter the Garden of Zhou again and learn Wang Zhizhe's methods from back then, he would turn those heavenly tome monoliths around the mausoleum of Zhou into little black stones and give one to her. To treat the heavenly tome monoliths as gifts, he definitely didn't think that if this really did become a reality, then it would inevitably be the most precious gift in history. Chapter 471. Luo would never have guessed what the gift Chen Changsheng spoke of was, but this did not affect her mood. Her teacher had said that he would specially give her a gift. This proved that in her teacher's heart, she was more important than Tang 36, Xianyuan Pe, and Zhixio combined. In her teacher's heart, she was definitely not just a student, right? Thinking of the heavenly tome monoliths in the Garden of Zhou, Chen Changsheng thought of that important matter. He asked Luo how her investigation was going. In the past few days, he had asked the priests of the Li Palace to help him investigate, but there was still no news. He could only place his last hope on her. Luo lowered her head, as if she did not want to speak. Chen Changsheng felt his lips were somewhat dry. With a slightly bitter voice, he said, "There's also no news from the elves?" Luo raised her head and met his anxious gaze. She bit her lip and gathered her courage to say, "The elves that are still on the continent are all scattered across the plains. It's very difficult to confirm, but what is certain is that the girl that teacher spoke of has not left the Garden of Zhou." Chen Changsheng looked at the fish in the lake in silence for a very long time. Luo was somewhat sad, but her small face squeezed out a smile. "Teacher, don't panic. I'll have someone investigate again." Chen Changsheng did not hear her words. He looked at the lake and muttered, "At that time, I clearly saw her sit on the great pung and fly into the mountains. She was already not far from the mountainside Whispering Wood, even though she was heavily injured." Then he fell silent. She had not left the Garden of Zhou. She could not have left the Garden of Zhou like him. She should still be in the Garden of Zhou. Perhaps she was alive, but it was even more likely that she was already dead. This was the end. If life was like the first time they met, and she was quietly sleeping on the pile of reeds, how good would that be, because there would always be a time when she would wake up. Chen Changsheng was very sad. This was the first time he had truly experienced such a feeling. Although he had occasionally thought that the girl might no longer be here, he had experienced it a little. But that was the grass under a rock, not enough to break through the hard ground. Although he had experienced it a little when he walked in front of the Black Dragon in the Tong Palace, it was still a separation, but it was different. He separated from this world, and the world separated from him. This was probably the separation. Then he remembered that he had promised her to do something for her. "In 2 days, I will go to the Divine General of the East's estate to break off the engagement." Luo raised her head in surprise. She thought to herself, after her teacher had entered the capital, he had already gone to the Divine General's estate to cancel the engagement twice, but he had not succeeded. Last time, Su Shiji had already made it clear that if he wanted to cancel the engagement again, he had to do it in front of Su Yurong. Su Yurong would be returning to the capital in a few days. So why was her teacher in such a hurry? Why didn't he wait? I promised her to break off the engagement. Chen Changsheng looked at the fish in the lake and said without blinking, "Since I'm sure she's gone, then I have to do it even more, and I have to do it quickly, or else I'm afraid she might think I'm lying to her." Luo Luo sat in the car and looked at the wall outside the window. Her face was pale. No one could understand how much courage she needed to tell Chen Changsheng that news. This was because she was very clear that with Chen Changsheng's personality, once he knew of this news, then she would have no hope. As expected, Chen Changsheng quickly decided to go to the Dongyu general's estate to break off the engagement. There was no hope for his fiancée. Furthermore, she was only his student. Jin Yulu, who was outside the carriage, faintly felt something and sighed. It was this sigh filled with pity that made Luo Luo cry. She put down the curtain and sobbed sadly. She thought to herself, "You guys don't understand anything. People who leave will always be more important in people's hearts. People who leave forever will never be able to be replaced in people's hearts." She understood this. When she was 5 years old, after her grandmother who loved her died in the Red River, she understood this. She knew that she could never win against the girl she never met, because the girl had already left. Perhaps only by leaving could she be remembered. Luo Luo raised her head and wiped off the tears on her face. She lifted up the curtain again and looked at the green tree of the Tradition Academy that was getting further and further away. She knew that it was time for her to leave. "Master, I have to make you remember me," she thought stubbornly. Tang 36 noticed that Chen Changsheng's mood was a bit off today and asked, "Are you all right?" Chen Changsheng put the wet clothes in the bucket on the clothesline and said, "I'm fine." He didn't want his friend to worry about him, and he always felt that the memories in the garden of Zhou belonged to the two of them, so he changed the topic. "Just now, when Prince Chen Lu wanted to come to the Tradition Academy, why didn't you agree?" Tang 36 raised his brows and said with slight mockery, "Oh, I'm not the principal of the Tradition Academy. Do I have the right to disagree?" Chun Chang Sheng carried the bucket into the house. As he passed by, he said, "You didn't say, but that face is so ugly it looks like—" He originally wanted to say that it looked like someone had died, but his words changed. "Like something big happened. My face is so handsome. Even if I gave him a bad look, how ugly could it be?" Tang 36 took the washboard in his other hand and followed. He said, "I don't like this person. It's not like you don't know." This was something that Chen Changsheng had never understood. He asked just why. "I feel that this guy is too hypocritical," Tang 36 said. Chun Changsheng said, "If you don't have proof, don't criticize." Tang 36 sneered. "Don't you feel that whether it's his speech or his actions, he gives off a feeling like a spring breeze?" Chun Changsheng was very confused, thinking, isn't this a compliment? He's a man. What reason does he have to make us feel like a spring breeze? Tang 36 disdainfully made his own conclusion. He must have a plan, and a big one at that. It's better to stay away from him. Chen Changsheng thought about it and felt that this was reasonable. But from the current situation, the imperial family had been separated into various counties. Other than the orthodoxy and Zhu Luo, they had no other powerful external help. Prince Chen Lu purposely befriending the Tradition Academy was understandable. As they talked, the two entered the house. After putting down the things, Chun Changsheng went to Zhixio's room. Zhixio's wounds were gradually improving. Although he still couldn't walk, he could move. A few days ago, they moved him back to the house. Chun Changsheng sat by the bed and carefully felt Zhixio's pulse. Then he took out his needle box and began to treat him. After a long time, he finished today's treatment. On the side, Tang 36 looked at Zhixio's still pale face and worriedly asked, "When will he get better?" Chun Changsheng shook his head and said, "That depends on his own life force." Zhishio opened his eyes and emotionlessly said, "You don't need to worry about that." At this moment, Xianyuan came out of the library, carrying a thick stack of challenge letters into the room. "This is only the first batch. I heard from Priest Liu that there's still a large pile of challenge letters in the Bureau of Ecclesiastic Education. It seems like that head of the Tianhai clan is really angry." Tang 36 said, "At such an old age, with such a high status, how can he still get angry like a child?" In the entire capital, only Clear Lake Restaurant could eat the blue lobster of the great western continent. Now that Clear Lake Restaurant was closed for an indefinite period of time, it was naturally very difficult to eat it. Anyone would be unhappy when their favorite food was suddenly unavailable. Xianyuan imagined how he would feel if someone didn't allow him to eat the roasted leg of lamb on the other side of the lake. He understood and even felt some sympathy for that head of the Tianhai clan. After a moment of silence, Qin Changsheng said, "Just for this plate of lobster, given the status of the Tianhai clan in the human world. If that head of the Tianhai clan truly went berserk, the Orthodox Academy really wouldn't be able to withstand him. From today onwards, there would presumably be countless challenge letters drifting over like snowflakes. No matter how good the three youths of the Orthodox Academy were at fighting, even if they still won every match, how could they endure so many matches? Even if they couldn't be beaten to death, they would probably be exhausted to death, and even if they didn't die from exhaustion, they would still be disgusted to death." As he looked at those challenge letters, he felt somewhat suffocated, just like he had said yesterday on the great banyan tree. Living this kind of life every day truly wasn't the kind of life he wanted. The truly troublesome thing was that among these challenge letters, there was one that was very heavy. Neither he nor Tang 36 could receive it. B. Tianxin, once the strongest expert of the Li Palace Academy at the initial level of star condensation, but he wasn't at the initial level of star condensation like Zhou Ziheng or Mu Laoban. In the Ivy League gathering and the grand examination, he only lost to Guanbai. There are even many people who suspect that he could have entered the middle level of star condensation long ago. But because the technique passed down in his family is too powerful and mysterious, he temporarily stopped here. Technique passed down in his family? He's not a student of the Li Palace Academy? If your family was stronger than the Li Palace Academy and you were in his shoes, what would you choose in the end? Whose son is he? His father is called Bianghong, and his mother is called Wu Chongbai. His family truly is very strong. Chen Changsheng did not sigh at the strangeness of these two names, because even someone as ignorant and inexperienced as he had heard of these two names. These two names were the same as Zhu Luo and Guan Xinka, signifying the storms of the world. But this was the first time he learned that these two storms of 8 directions were actually husband and wife, and that they had even given birth to a son. Qin Changxing sighed. "Even if I can win, it won't be easy. If he won against the little one, then perhaps his parents would come knocking on his door." "Can you not be as narcissistic as me?" Tang 36 asked. "Where did you get the confidence to beat him?" Chen Changsheng really wanted to say that whether it was in the wilderness outside Xunyang City or recently in front of the Orthodox Academy, he had already defeated several initial level star condensation cultivators. But then he remembered that Tang 36 had said that this initial level star condensation was no ordinary initial level star condensation cultivator. Bi Tianxin couldn't defeat Guanbai back then, but that doesn't mean that his strength is inferior to Guanbai's. You can view the two of them as equals. Tang 36 looked into his eyes and said, "You've met Guanbai, so how many chances do you think you have?" Chen Changsheng recalled that day when he saw that scholar on the street and sensed that sword intent. After a moment of silence, he said, "Not the slightest chance." Tang 36 replied, "Then it's also impossible for you to defeat Bi Tianxin." On the bed, Zhishio once more opened his eyes and said, "I fought with him." The three looked over and asked in shock, "Who won?" Chapter 472. Of course it's him. Zhishio looked at them like they were idiots. Before entering the capital, he still had not broken into ethereal opening. Even if his wolf bloodline was special, he still could not defeat a star condensation expert. He added, "But if I fight him now, I'm confident." Tang 36 asked in surprise, "You're confident that you can defeat him?" Zhixia replied, "No, I'm confident that I can take him down with me." The room instantly fell silent. Tang 36's head ached as he thought, "Besides me, these fellows in the Orthodox Academy are all freaks. It's truly impossible to communicate with them." Chun Chongsheng suddenly looked at him and asked, "Just what do you want to do?" Logically speaking, with Tang 36's personality, no matter how arrogant he was, he would not intentionally provoke a powerful figure like the Tianhai clan head in Clear Lake Restaurant, thus causing the situation to suddenly become intense. Tang 36 was quiet for a while, then said, "We've analyzed what both sides want to do. Perhaps His Holiness, the Pope, wants to sharpen your sword even faster. But why does the Tianhai clan cooperate? Because they want to create momentum, ultimately forcing me to confront Su Yurong. Do you want to fight a bloody battle with Su Yurong to the end?" Chun Chongsheng very seriously thought this over. He realized that he had no reason to fight with that girl he had never met, so he shook his head. Then it settled. Tang 36 said, "What I want to do now is to make it so that they can't even think of a way to deal with us. After this is done, you can peacefully study and cultivate." "Can I really?" Chen Chongxing looked at him and asked seriously. Tang 36's sword-like eyebrows perked up. "Who am I?" Chen Chongsheng suddenly thought of Su Li by the hot spring in the mountains and felt that this matter was rather unreliable. But why would they suddenly increase their suppression of the Orthodox Academy? The mighty head of the Tianhai clan would naturally not change his established policy just because he couldn't eat lobster. Seeing this, Tang 36 started laughing. He seemed to be harboring some evil intentions. "It's very obvious that your cheap father-in-law has a very good impression of you. The Tianhai clan is very worried that if Su Yurong really does take a fancy to you and refuses to fight with you, what will they do?" Chen Chongxing didn't know how to respond, so he rather stiffly changed the topic. "First, we have to resolve the problem in front of us, how to avoid being drowned by them." He had just said these words in Clear Lake Restaurant. When the Orthodox Academy had fallen into a predicament, Tang 36 had returned from the mausoleum of books with a bowl of soy milk in his left hand and a youtiao in his right. At the gate of the Orthodox Academy, he had forcefully declared that he would resolve this matter, and then he had fiercely pressed the youtiao into the bowl of soy milk, saying that he wanted to drown them. Now, Chun Chongsheng really wanted to know how he planned to drown them. The method of blocking soldiers when they come could obviously not be used anymore. If he did not have a good way to deal with it, he could only stop thinking about it and directly go to the Li Palace to request an audience with the Pope. There are many ways to drown. Tang 36 said confidently, "My next method is called drowning the 7 armies." Drowning the 7 armies? Chen Chongsheng was confused. Tang 36 suddenly said, "I heard that the Orthodoxy cavalry captured 2 more groups of foreign tourists who wanted to break into the Orthodox Academy to see the scenery." Chun Chongsheng thought to himself, "What does this have to do with what we are discussing now?" Tang 36 continued, "This incident reminded me of something. Since many people want to come in and watch, we might as well sell tickets directly. We can still make some money." Chun Chongsheng and Xian Yuan still did not understand. Tang 36 looked at them and said seriously, "What I want to say is the Orthodox Academy is very large. With just the few of us, won't we feel lonely?" On the morning of the next day, just as the sky began to brighten, many people gathered outside the Orthodox Academy to watch the spectacle. It was obvious that the fact that the Orthodoxy cavalry had captured 3 groups of tourists who wanted to break into the Orthodox Academy yesterday had not affected the mood of the other people. Moreover, the incident at Clear Lake Restaurant yesterday and the rage of the Tianhai clan head had already spread throughout the entire capital. Everyone knew that in just one day, more than 40 cultivators would come to challenge the Orthodox Academy. It had to be known that in the past few days, there had only been a total of several dozen matches. Who would be willing to miss out on this sort of spectacle? Of course, the Orthodox Academy could drag it out like it did in the first 2 days, but now was not the same as before. Today, there were more than 40 letters of challenge. Tomorrow, there would probably be even more letters of challenge. Snowflakes incessantly fell. Snowballs incessantly rolled. When the time came, the snow on the ground would get thicker and thicker, and the snowballs would roll even higher than the academy gate. What could those youths of the Orthodox Academy do then? The flower peddlers outside the alley had already arrived, and the breakfast peddlers had taken up good spots even earlier. As the crowd ate hot steamed buns and refreshing cold noodles, they excitedly discussed this matter. The air was suffused with the smell of meat, stuffing, and cucumber. So much so that those infatuated girls who adored Tang 36 wanted nothing more than to hide the fresh flowers in their bosoms, afraid that the fragrance of the flowers would be ruined. The crowd suddenly quieted down, because in front of the pergola on the opposite side of the street, many people had appeared. These people were old and young, tall and short, but they were all silent. They were clearly not commoners who had come to watch the spectacle, because they all exuded an extremely dangerous qi. They were all true experts who had come to challenge the Orthodox Academy. Seeing these several dozen experts that the Tianhai clan had transferred from various academies and even from the counties, many people couldn't help but worry for the Orthodox Academy, thinking, how can they win? How can they finish? At this moment, the gate of the Orthodox Academy was pushed open from the inside. The street outside of the academy was completely silent, and the atmosphere was a bit strange. Even the girls were only looking at the gate with hope, but they weren't shouting Tang 36's name and saying crazy things like, "I must marry you," like a few days ago. The person who walked out of the Orthodox Academy wasn't Tang 36, nor was it Chen Changsheng. It was Officer Xan. Officer Xan looked at the crowd around him, especially the experts on the far side of the street, and couldn't help but shake his head. His expression was a bit complicated, but it was hard to tell if he was worried for the Orthodox Academy or something else. He took out a piece of paper from his bosom and ordered his subordinate to carefully stick it on the wall next to the gate of the Orthodox Academy. Then he turned to the crowd, cleared his throat, and said loudly, "Today the Orthodox Academy will temporarily stop accepting challenge requests." The 100 Blossom Street and the streets further away were completely silent. The Orthodox Academy's response was within everyone's expectations, but just as everyone had thought, they couldn't drag this on indefinitely, so the Orthodox Academy must have new methods. In other words, logically speaking, this Li Palace priest should have something else to say, and perhaps something big would happen. As expected, Officer Xan continued, "Today, the Orthodox Academy will officially start accepting new students." Chapter 473. From 100 Blossom Lane to the main street, there was a moment of silence, followed by an uproar. The crowd discussed fervently. The stewards and important figures of the 4 great markets in the pergola shook their heads in silence, while those experts challenging the Orthodox Academy frowned in displeasure. At a time like this, the Orthodox Academy suddenly began to recruit new students. What were they trying to do? Right now, the Orthodox Academy didn't even have a proper teacher. So what sort of students were they recruiting? Furthermore, it had been a long time since spring. Students with some potential had already entered the other 5 Ivies. Even if they wanted to recruit new students, what kind of students could they recruit? No matter what people thought, Priest Xian's words had already been spoken, and the Orthodox Academy's enrollment notice had also been posted. When the Orthodoxy cavalry removed the 2 cordons in front of the Orthodox Academy, the populace surged like a tide to the gate of the Orthodox Academy and began to read the enrollment notice. The semester is 3 years, and the final exam will be the standard. If you can pass, then you will be recognized as a student of the Tradition Academy. If you can't, then get out. Who wrote this notice? Why is it so messy? Hey, look at this one. The students of the Orthodox Academy actually don't charge tuition fees, and they even have allowances in food. The enrollment notice of the Orthodox Academy used red paper, and the words were written in ink. The black words on the red paper were exceptionally eye-catching, and they were clearly seen by everyone. Those simple yet not so simple terms, and those simple to the point of being somewhat crude, directly made the people who saw the notice flabbergasted. They didn't know how to react at all. The stewards of the 4 great markets went to make copies of the provisions of the enrollment notice. As a result, the people under the awning and those experts preparing to challenge the Orthodox Academy all knew the specific details of the Orthodox Academy's enrollment. After reading the notice, the stewards were even more speechless. They could clearly see that this matter was not in line with Chen Changsheng's personality. It was definitely the work of that young Master Tang. Thus, the stewards of the 3 great markets all walked in front of the Heavenly Fragrance Market's position and asked the steward of the Heavenly Fragrance Market, "What exactly did your young master want to do? Using this to stall for time? Let's not talk about anything else. We cooperated quite well yesterday. So how about we let little Director Chin try to use 5 strikes in the next round?" After reading the announcement, the crowd did not disperse. Instead, they surrounded the gate of the Orthodox Academy and began to discuss. Up until now, no one knew why the Orthodox Academy had chosen the middle of summer, which was not the traditional time to recruit new students, to suddenly start recruiting. But this did not stop people from making their own judgments. The Tradition Academy shouldn't be able to recruit any students. Putting aside the fact that the Ivy Academies had already accepted new students in the spring, just the current situation of the Orthodox Academy meant that not many people would dare to apply. The current Orthodox Academy was no longer the taboo, forgotten graveyard of the capital like it was last year. There were already signs of a new life, but what could they do? The situation in the capital this year was tense, especially when the Orthodox Academy was at the heart of the struggle between 2 great powers. Entering the Orthodox Academy at this time to study, not to mention learning anything, would only bring about endless troubles. At this moment, the gate of the Tradition Academy opened again. Qin Changsheng and the others carried a few tables and walked out with pen, ink, and paper. The crowd surrounded him with a rumble. The people of Jingdo had always been fearless, and they directly began to ask these questions. Fortunately, the Li Palace clergy and the Tradition cavalry arrived quickly. Before Chen Changsheng and the others' heads were dizzy from the noisy crowd, they had already separated them into an area. Qin Changsheng, Tang 36, and Xian Yuan sat behind 3 tables. The table was covered with paper, the ink in the inkstone was already ground, and the pen was placed on the rack. Only the table in front of Chen Changsheng had an additional name list and the seal of the principal. Everything was ready, only waiting for someone to sign up. At this time, the morning light was already bright. At 8 or 9 o'clock, the fresh sun had already risen. Time passed slowly. In front of the Tradition Academy, there were still 3 tables and 3 people. The crowd surrounding the announcement had already dispersed, but no one came to sign up. Xian Yuan looked at the delicate brush on the rack and then looked at his rough hands. He thought to himself that pulling up trees was easy, but writing was too hard. Fortunately, no one came today. Chun Changsheng lowered his head in embarrassment, but since it was already like this, he didn't want to complain about Tang 36. He could only helplessly think, could it be that no one came to sign up? Tang 36's table was the busiest. From time to time, young girls would come up shyly, put down their sachets, and run away like frightened deer. There were also some brave girls who asked him to write a fan for them. Of course, these girls only wanted to use this rare opportunity to get closer to him, but no one actually signed up. Minister Xan, who was responsible for maintaining order, had an increasingly ugly expression, but Tang 36 didn't feel anything. Yes, he didn't feel embarrassed at all, or at least he didn't show it. He smiled warmly, talked softly with the young girls, put the sachets and other gifts on the table, and sincerely expressed that he would use them well. For a moment, Qin Changsheng took advantage of the slightly quieter table to go over and whisper, "Which one is Tian Xin?" Tang 36 said, "This kind of person obviously can't just casually appear. I looked, he's not here." Qin Changsheng relaxed a little and then said, "Your table is almost full." Tang 36 arched his brows, indescribably confident and proud. "Envious of G?" Tang 36 lightly coughed and said, "But there's not a single sign up for him on your table." Tang 36 lightly coughed and said, "But there's not a single sign up for him on your table." Qin Changsheng said, "I see that you very much enjoy the feeling of being surrounded by girls, so you really aren't in a hurry." Tang 36 said, "What do you know? I'm building up a good image. The Orthodox Academy is recruiting new students, and I'm a living signboard, so I naturally have to be more patient and gentle." The news that the Orthodox Academy was recruiting new students quickly spread through the entire capital. Many people, even those important figures, couldn't suppress their curiosity. They either personally came or sent their capable subordinates, wanting to know just what these youths from the Orthodox Academy wanted to do. Two important figures had often appeared in that tea house in 100 Flowers Lane in the past few days, so they naturally wouldn't be absent today. They were Taoist Siyuan, who had proposed the new rules for the all-school martial exhibition, and Mao Chiu, the Archbishop of the Hall of Illustrious Persons, who had come as a representative of the Pope's will. Taoist Siyuan looked at the deserted entrance to the Orthodox Academy, at the 3 tables and the 3 youths, and shook his head. Truly a troublemaker. Mao Chiu sat across from him at the table, looking at the smiling Tang 36, who was waving at the girls in the crowd. He laughed and said, "Truly a clown." Before he became Archbishop of the Hall of Illustrious Persons, he had been the principal of the Heavenly Tao Academy. Before Tang 36 entered the Orthodox Academy, he had been his student. Taoist Siyuan creased his brow and said, "This sort of farce is truly a disgrace to the Li Palace." "A farce? I don't think so. Perhaps they won't be able to recruit a single new student today, but—" Mao Chiu's smile faded, and he indifferently said, "The entire continent will soon know that the Orthodox Academy, after nearly 20 years, is finally beginning to recruit again." The Orthodox Academy began to recruit again. The recruitment here referred to a large-scale, formal recruitment, and not the situation like when Qin Changsheng mistakenly entered the Orthodox Academy. In the eyes of many elders of the Orthodoxy and many commoners who remembered the glory days of the Orthodox Academy, this was a very symbolic event. But at that time, in the period from morning to noon, this event really seemed like a farce. The entrance to the Orthodox Academy always had 3 tables and 3 youths. It was so deserted that even the bystanders felt a little embarrassed, let alone the people involved. At some point, Tang 36 had Xian Yuan find a large umbrella from the Orthodox Academy storeroom and placed it on top of the 3 tables to block out the sunlight and to pass the time. "Is it okay?" Qin Changsheng lowered his head and asked. At this time, the girls who delivered the flowers couldn't stand the heat anymore and reluctantly returned home. The people who stayed on the street saw this side and discussed. From their expressions, it was obvious that they were laughing at them, although they didn't seem to have any evil intentions. But at this time in the capital, who knew how many people were laughing at them with deep evil intentions? Chapter 474. Of course you can. Tang 36 didn't show any sign of defeat on his face. He said, "Did you notice that although no one came forward, more and more people are coming to see us?" Xian Yuan was suffering from the heat. He breathed heavily and said, "Everyone in the capital is coming to see us. What's the benefit?" Hearing this, Qin Changsheng couldn't help but laugh. "What a stupid bear." Tang 36 said to Qin Changsheng, "Look at the crowd carefully. Don't you see a lot of people who are younger and brighter than those who came to see before?" Chun Chong Sheng looked at the crowd and realized it was true. There were a lot more young people who came to see the Tradition Academy today. They aren't here to see the fun. Tang 36 glanced at Xian Yuanpa and said, "They aren't here to see the fun either. They're here to see us." Chun Chongsheng was a little surprised and asked, "Do you mean that they are really considering whether or not to take the exam?" "That's right." Tang 36 glanced at the tea house not far away and then looked at the Tian Hai family's elites, who had a contemptuous expression on their faces. He said, "Everyone has forgotten one thing. Next year's great trial is just around the corner, and right after that is the Ivy Festival. Right now, most of the people in the capital are young students, successfully purified. I don't need too many meditation state cultivators." Chun Chongsheng remembered the young students he and Luo Luo saw on the street before and after the foundation trial last year. He understood why Tang 36 was always so confident. Those young students who came from other counties or even the south didn't have the same background as the students of the 6 Ivies, so their overall level was much lower. But it didn't mean that their talent was bad. In fact, every year after the foundation trial and the Ivy Festival, there would be a lot of students from other counties who were recruited by the 6 Ivies. And these young students obviously wanted to enter the 6 Ivies to learn the real profound Shoshin methods, follow famous teachers, and get a strong background. The Tradition Academy was also one of the 6 Ivies. To these students who came from other counties, it must be attractive. But why don't they want to come up and sign up? They didn't even ask. Chun Chong Sheng looked at a slightly nervous youngster in the crowd and asked in confusion, "Please, today, no. This summer, the Tradition Academy is the focal point of the entire capital. These pitiful country kids don't have the guts to come out. Someone needs to help push them." Yes, when I came to the capital last year, I was also a youth from the countryside. The first thing you did after entering the capital was to go to the divine general of the East's estate to break off the engagement. Do you think everyone is as thick-skinned as you and as bold as you? At this moment, Tang 36 noticed that the eyes of the young people in the crowd were gradually becoming anxious and struggling. He felt more confident and said in a low voice, "It's time." The area of the umbrella wasn't big enough, so the inkstone in front of the table was scorching hot. When Xian Yuanpa moved it, his fingers were red and painful. Hearing Tang 36 words, he thought that Tang 36 was laughing at him again. Maybe he would say something stupid, like braised bear paw. Just when he was about to raise his fist and reason with Tang 36, he was suddenly shocked. With a thud, Tang 36 jumped onto the table. The wind blew and the umbrella was opened. The crowd suddenly became quiet and no one talked anymore. They looked at the gate of the Tradition Academy and looked at Tang 36, who was standing on the table. They thought, what is he going to do now? At this moment, the sunlight fell on his body. His expensive gold-embroidered robe fluttered in the wind. The one shuai sword on his waist was shining. What was brighter were the jade pendants on his belt and the gold bracelets on his wrist. Chun Chong Sheng looked over and felt like he was going blind. Now he understood why he dressed himself like this in the morning and what the so-called signboard meant. "I say, we are all young people. Do you need to be so shy? If you want to come, come quickly. Time waits for no man." Friends, Tang 36 stood on the table and looked down at the young people in the crowd and called them enthusiastically. Chun Chong Sheng felt so embarrassed that he wanted to bury his head under the table. He roughly understood why the Wen Shui Tang family could become the richest family on the continent. The crowd was quiet at first, then they started laughing. After a while, a bystander shouted from the crowd, "Why do we want to apply to the Tradition Academy?" Not only was Tang 36 not displeased, he was actually very happy. He thought to himself that he had forgotten to ask the Tianxiang market to send a few professionals over yesterday. Who would have thought that a spontaneous person would appear and say in a clear voice, Even though the preliminary examination of the great trial has been delayed, it is still imminent. There are only a few days left. Don't you want to improve by leaps and bounds and show off your talents at the Ivy Festival? A dark-skinned young student who might have come from a rural area gathered his courage and asked, "We can apply for another school." Speaking of which, other than the most famous 6 Ivies in the capital, there were countless other schools. Tang 36 looked at the young student from the village and mocked. "You are comparing those schools to our Tradition Academy?" As soon as he said this, the bystander and bystander all nodded. They thought that no matter how weak the Tradition Academy was, since it was reopened, normal schools couldn't compare. Then someone asked, "Then why can't we apply to the other 5 schools?" According to the tradition, the Ivies will only accept new students after the preliminary exam. Only, everyone listen carefully. Only the Tradition Academy will accept new students before the preliminary exam. Tang 36 took out a fan out of nowhere. He waved it and said, "If you can't even pass the preliminary exam, which school will accept you?" In the end, applying to the Tradition Academy is the safest choice. We don't want to be safe. A young student who looked calm shook his head and said, "Since we came to the capital from thousands of miles away, of course we are prepared to face thousands of enemies. We would rather apply to other schools after the preliminary exam." It was obvious that this young student had a certain level of confidence in his strength, realm, and learning ability. Tang 36 looked at that person and asked, "How old are you this year?" That young student answered, 24 this year." "You are still a young man. How come you don't have the sharpness of a young man?" Tang 36 looked at that young student and slightly raised his eyebrows in disdain. That young student wanted to argue, but Tang 36 didn't give him the chance. He looked at the crowd and said, "Why do you have to enter the Heavenly Academy? Because the Pope came from the Heavenly Academy? Why do you have to enter the Priest Seminary and the Lee Palace Academy? Just because we're closer to His Holiness the Pope? Why do you have to enter the 13 divisions of Radiant Green? Because there are many beautiful senior sisters there." Hearing his words, the crowd burst into laughter. "If you insist on entering the Star Caesar Academy, I have no objections. I only have blessings and admiration. But if you originally wanted to enter those schools..." Tang 36 closed his fan and slapped it on his palm. He looked at the crowd and said proudly, "Then why don't you choose the Tradition Academy? Gentlemen, we are all youths, fresh and bright, unconventional and unconventional. Our Tradition Academy has many things waiting to be done. It is a clean piece of paper. Why don't you join us? Besides, how can those schools compare to our Tradition Academy?" That young student felt like this fan was knocking against his heart and subconsciously became much more serious. He actually completely listened to Tang 36's words and even felt that they were somewhat reasonable. The scholars that came from the countryside of the counties and even from the distant south had actually only heard rumors about the schools of the capital. They didn't understand the differences between them, so they didn't feel that there was anything special about Tang 36's words. But to the experts of the Tianhai clan in front of the awning and the many officials in the carriages, these words were particularly grating on the ears. The Heavenly Academy, the Priest Seminary, the Lee Palace Academy, the 13 divisions of Radiant Green, all of them were inferior to the Orthodox Academy? It must be known that the several dozen cultivators preparing to challenge the Orthodox Academy today had basically all come from these 4 schools. Even Bi Tianxin, who had never shown his face, had always considered himself a disciple of the Lee Palace Academy despite his extraordinary background. In the tea house, Mao Qiuyu and Daoist Siyuan couldn't help but frown. Daoist Siyuan had also come from the Lee Palace Academy, while Mao Qiuyu had first been a student of the Heavenly Academy, then a teacher, then principal. How could they agree with Tang 36's words? Sure enough, an extremely angry voice arose from the crowd. "What makes you say that?" Tang 36 didn't even look at that person and continued, His Holiness the Pope really did come from the Heavenly Academy. Lee Palace Academy and Temple Seminary are indeed in the Lee Palace. But you must understand that the principal of the Orthodox Academy is called Chun Chong Sheng. You can study in the Lee Palace Academy and Temple Seminary your entire life, and you may not even get to see His Holiness the Pope. But what if you enter the Orthodox Academy? At this point, he stopped and smiled without saying anything, seeming to have a deeper meaning. Everyone knew the Pope's attitude towards Chen Chongsheng. Many young students glanced at each other and began to discuss in a low voice. They seemed to be a bit moved. Let me be more direct. Everyone, please look, this kid who is as strong as a mountain, his name is Xian Yuan Pa. He is a normal youngster from the Bear tribe of the Yao region. Tang 36 pointed at Xian Yuan Pa with his fan and said, he doesn't have any talent, he doesn't have any cultivation method, he doesn't have any background. You can say that he doesn't have any if he wants anything. Even he himself felt very ashamed, so he voluntarily dropped out of the Star Seeker Academy. Then he was picked up by Chun Chong Sheng and Princess Luo Luo from the night market, and the result? The crowd became quiet. He was very satisfied with this effect and continued. The result? He entered the Orthodox Academy. His wounds haven't even healed, and he didn't even participate in the great trial. But the Divine Ordinance Council already placed him on the honor roll of green clouds. Hearing this, the young students from other provinces started thinking. They looked at Xian Yuan Pa behind the table and were even more moved. Many people knew about this, and it was indeed very convincing. Was the Orthodox Academy really a place that could turn stone into gold? Chapter 475. No wonder he was the successor of the Wen Shui Tang family. Tang 36 words truly had the power to enchant people's hearts. The area in front of the Tradition Academy became much quieter. Many people began to seriously consider the terms of the enrollment notice. The only one who was not satisfied was Xian Yuan Pa. He was very unhappy. What did he mean by saying that he had no talent? And he was ashamed? I'm ashamed my ass. But he knew why Tang 36 used him as an example, so he had no choice but to endure it. Even if his breathing became a lot heavier, he was even forced to stand up under Tang 36's signal. He raised his thick right arm, squeezed out an honest smile, and waved to the crowd around him. The crowd applauded. Tang 36 was very satisfied with the effect of his advertisement. He continued, I just mentioned Princess Luo Luo. His voice suddenly rose. That's right. If you enter the Tradition Academy, the 800 miles of the Red River, the Lady of the Yao area, the treasure of the two saints, Princess Luo Hong, the White Emperor will be your classmate. Also, the successor appointed by His Holiness, the youngest principal of the Tradition Academy, Chen Chongsheng, will enthusiastically teach everyone. After saying this, he signaled Qin Chong Sheng to stand up and wave to the crowd. Qin Chong Sheng felt very embarrassed. He turned his head and looked at the notice on the wall of the Tradition Academy. He was very serious, as if the black and red words hid a great secret that could change his fate. Tang 36 didn't care. He looked at the crowd and continued, You should all understand by now. In the entire capital, no, in the entire human world, including Scholatry Manor and the front yard of Mount Lee, there's no place with a stronger background and a stronger backer than our Orthodox Academy. Most importantly, if you enter the Orthodox Academy, you will have an extremely outstanding classmate. The first enthusiastic citizen of the capital asked at the right time, Who is it? Tang 36 eyes brightened. He thought that he should ask the manager of the Heavenly Fragrance Market to find this person and give him a small fortune. His eyes brightened. Under the blazing sunlight, his body also seemed to light up. Whether it was the Wen Shui sword, the golden bracelet, or the jade pendant, they were all shining in front of the crowd. He laughed 3 times and said, Sorry, that's me. Perhaps some young friends have come from afar and don't know who I am. Please allow me to introduce myself to everyone. My name is Tang 36. At this point, he glanced at Chen Chongsheng and continued, I'm not the 36th child in my family, but when I entered the proclamation of azure clouds at the age of 15, I was ranked 36th. Hearing these words, those country kids who really didn't know his identity couldn't help but gasp in surprise, thinking that a 15-year-old was able to enter the honor roll of azure clouds. The Tradition Academy really does have many crouching tigers. Everyone, don't be too shocked. Please look behind me again. Tang 36 pointed at Qin Changsheng and said, "Our principal Qin will only be 16 in another 3 months." Accurately speaking, when he was 15, he was already at the upper stage of ethereal opening. He has never been on the proclamation of azure clouds, because when he was qualified to be on the proclamation of azure clouds, the proclamation of azure clouds no longer had the qualifications to accept him. Right now, Chen Changsheng was already famous on the continent. Even the farthest provinces were talking about his story. But after hearing this introduction, the young students in the crowd still felt shocked. When they looked at the Tradition Academy's enrollment notice again, their gazes became heated, and some of the heated gazes directly fell on Qin Changsheng's body. Qin Changsheng couldn't do anything anymore. He stood up helplessly and bowed to the crowd, causing a round of enthusiastic cheers. Speaking of azure clouds, Tao of azure clouds, I just remembered that I didn't finish. Right now, in the Tradition Academy, there is a future classmate of yours lying on the ground. Tang 36 said loudly, "His name is Wofu Zhixiu." Once this was said, the crowd went into an uproar again. Qin Changsheng became famous this year, but the legendary story of the wolf tribe youngster fighting against the demon tribe alone on the snowy plains had already been passed down in the human world for many years. Back then, Su Yurong was ranked first on the honor roll of azure clouds, and Zhixiu was always below her. But any young man or girl who was determined to learn or pursue Tao knew his name. Tang 36 continued, "Let's talk about the honor roll of azure clouds. Back then, the only person who could beat Lord Zhixiu was Su Yurong. But you should know that Su Yurong is our little principal, Chen's." Qin Changsheng couldn't hold it anymore and glared at him. Tang 36 then realized that he was a bit forgetful, so he quickly skipped this part and said, "The sun is a bit big today, I forgot where I was. Weren't we talking about myself just now?" A round of cheers came from the crowd, as well as a young girl's dissatisfied voice towards the crowd. Tang 36 calmed his mind and said calmly and seriously, "The reason why I said that if you all want to enter the Tradition Academy, the most important thing is to have a classmate like me. In other words, why is the Tradition Academy winning because of me? It's not because I'm strong. In terms of strength, I definitely can't compare to freaks like Chen Changsheng and Zhixiu, but I come from the Wen Shui Tang family, so I can be your strongest supporter on your path of learning." He pointed at the notice in front of the Tradition Academy and said, "For example, we don't charge tuition and we even give allowances. Of course, it's only for this year. There's no way in the future." A young student frowned and asked, "If you don't charge tuition and you still want to give money, then aren't you buying students?" "Not buying, we're bribing." Tang 36's expression was still calm. He smiled and said, "If you successfully purify after entering the academy, you will receive 5 taels of silver per month. If you are at the initial stage of meditation, you will receive 50 taels of silver per month. Every time you break through to the next stage, you will receive double the amount of silver per month. If you successfully complete ethereal opening, besides the silver per month, you will receive 10 pieces of crystal to help with your cultivation." The Tradition Academy's enrollment notice only stated that there would be allowances and that there would be no tuition, but there was no specific amount. At this time, upon hearing the details of Tang 36's narration, the crowd instantly became absolutely silent. Even the experts of the Tianhai family in the distance were somewhat shocked. As for the stewards of the 3 great markets, they all looked at the steward of the Heavenly Fragrance Market with indescribable shock, thinking to themselves, "Does the Winshui family know that your young master wastes money like this?" Tang 36 was very satisfied with the reaction of the crowd and continued, "As for the problem of food, There's no need for everyone to worry. Clear Lake Restaurant is currently our Tradition Academy's dining hall." Upon hearing these words, the young students from other counties were fine, but the common people of the capital, especially a few gluttons, almost fainted. Clear Lake Restaurant was the capital's most famous and most expensive restaurant. It was actually really going to close down. It was actually going to become the Tradition Academy's dining hall. Xian Yuanpo was very satisfied and decided to forgive Tang 36's previous actions. But many people looked at Tang 36 like he was the enemy who had killed their father. Tang 36 looked at these people in confusion and asked, "What's wrong?" Someone couldn't help but say, "Sir, this is too exaggerated. Is there anyone who runs an academy like this?" Tang 36 seriously replied, "I'm relatively rich. Could it be that everyone still hasn't realized this fact? Thank you to a certain character for providing this suggestion, although in the end I still did not adopt it. Everyone, see you tomorrow." Chapter 476. Without a doubt, if what Tang 36 said became reality, then the Tradition Academy would definitely become the academy with the best conditions in history. But since it was an academy, then the most important thing wasn't the cafeteria or the allowance, but what could be learned here. Some people might not care, but most students would. I heard that the Tradition Academy doesn't even have a teacher now. What can we learn if we go in? The young student, who was confident in his ability, asked seriously. This is Officer Xian from the Department of Traditional Education. The tea house over there. Yes, that one. The Archbishop of the Hall of Illustrious Persons, Mao Qiuyu, is drinking tea there. Tang 36 looked at that person and said, "You should have also seen that the Tradition Academy is protected by the Tradition Cavalry, and the Li Palace clergy are in charge of maintaining order. If we need a teacher, do you think it will be difficult?" But the clergy of the Department of Traditional Education haven't taught for a long time. And I'm really worried about what Xiuxing methods we can learn in the Tradition Academy. After all, there hasn't been a class here for many years. The young student asked seriously and persistently. Stupid. Tang 36 looked at him and shook his head. Qin Changsheng is well read in the scrolls of the way. The Tradition Academy has a long history and deep knowledge. What Xiuxing methods do you want to learn? After saying this, he didn't explain anymore. He looked at the crowd and said, "The Tradition Academy only has one day to recruit students. Don't miss this opportunity." Seeing that he was ignored, the student made up his mind. He was the first to walk to the table and said, "I want to sign up." Just like many things in the world, as long as someone took the lead, more people would follow. In just a moment, many young students who were standing in the crowd all came to the table. Because they were worried that the number of students would be limited, they even started fighting. People kept shouting, "I want to sign up. I'm the third in the line." "I also want to sign up. I'm the second in Jiangnan County. I've already successfully entered meditation. Principal Chen, I'm willing to pay the tuition fee. I don't need the allowance either. I just want you to accept me." In order to participate in the pre-exam for the Great Trial, and more importantly, to catch the attention of the Ivy League schools at the Ivy Festival, countless young students from the counties of the Zhou dynasty and the south were currently gathered in the capital. At this time, the entrance of the Tradition Academy was completely surrounded, and the scene became very noisy. Qin Changxing took over the forms filled out by the students and gave them to Officer Xian and the others to register. He didn't directly record them on the register, because if they wanted to enter the Tradition Academy, they still needed to take an exam. Otherwise, if some criminals were to sneak into the academy, then they wouldn't be able to have a peaceful future. With the help of Officer Xian and the other officers from the Department of Traditional Education, the registration for the new students of the Tradition Academy went very smoothly. The registration forms on the table became thicker and thicker. Xian Yuanpo kept rubbing his hands, while Tang 36 smiled and greeted every student who came to register. He was also responsible for answering some of their questions. Qin Changsheng looked at this scene and couldn't help but shake his head. He thought to himself, what was so attractive about this event that this usually lazy guy was so interested in it? At this moment, a mocking voice suddenly came from the street. You make it sound better than a song. What powerful background and many techniques. In the end, isn't it just that you guys can't handle the challenge from the Ivy League schools, so you recruited some students to be your scapegoats? Hearing this, the entrants of the Tradition Academy instantly became very quiet. The young students' expressions changed slightly. They looked at each other speechlessly because they realized that what this person said was actually very reasonable. Otherwise, why didn't they recruit earlier or later? But at this time, the Tradition Academy started to recruit new students. The crowd gradually separated and revealed the person who said this. Tang 36 squinted his eyes slowly and his gaze became sharp. The person should still be very young, but his aura and appearance were very old. He wore a green shirt that was washed until it became white, and he wore a pair of cloth shoes on his feet. But his gaze was very deep, as if he could see through everyone's mind. There was a hint of mocking hanging on the corner of his mouth. He looked at Tang 36 and said, Is it because I've seen through your little calculations that you feel very embarrassed? Tang 36 didn't answer this question. Instead, he stared at the person and asked, Btion Xan? Hearing this name, Qin Changsheng stood up. Xian Yuan clenched his fists. Correct, I am Btion Xan. The person looked at their reactions and slightly raised his eyebrows. He seemed very disdainful and said, Who I am isn't important. What's important is whether or not what I say is correct. Qin Changsheng said, How can you be sure that what you say is correct? You are Qin Changsheng? The person looked at him very seriously and then shook his head. He seemed to be a little disappointed and said, I originally thought that you were as amazing as Qiu Shanjun, but now it seems that you are only SOO. Qin Changsheng was silent for a moment and said, Please advise me. Since you know that I am Btion Xan, then you should know that I have the reputation of Btion Xan, the heaven's heart diviner. The person said with slight mockery, These little tricks can fool these foolish children from the countryside. But do you think they can fool me? Qin Changsheng fell silent again, then shook his head and said, This is wrong. Btion Xan slightly raised his eyebrows and smirked at him. You're right and wrong? Yesterday I said something to Tang 36. Without proof, one cannot judge a person's heart. Qin Changsheng looked at him and said, In Xuanyang City, I also said this to Su Li. Don't imagine the world to be too dark, because that only means that you yourself are too dark. After hearing these two sentences, Btion Xan's raised eyebrows gradually fell back down. He naturally did not approve of Qin Changsheng's words, nor did he care about the first half of his words mentioning Tang 36. However, the latter half of his words mentioning Su Li forced him to be cautious. But this is what all of you did. A mocking smile once more appeared on his lips, making him seem rather repulsive. He looked at Tang 36 and said, Could it be that the Orthodox Academy will not let these students fight in the future? The surrounding young students were already extremely nervous. If what this person said was true, then entering the Orthodox Academy would mean taking an enormous risk. How could they possibly be a match for him? If they died so mysteriously, how could they live up to the ardent hopes of their parents? Wouldn't the grand examination be nothing more than a bubble? Many gazes fell on Tang 36, wanting to hear just what he had to say. Tang 36 was quiet for a very long time before finally giving his answer. If they apply to the Orthodox Academy and pass the examination, then they will be students of the Orthodox Academy. Since they are students of the Orthodox Academy, they will naturally have to fight for the Orthodox Academy. These words caused an uproar. Chapter 477. Bi Tianxin was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected Tang 36 to directly admit to this matter. Slightly mocking, he said, Although your conduct is extremely unlikable, you're still rather magnanimous." Then he turned to the students and smirked. You all heard it. Those young students instantly panicked. Some students who were preparing to register but had not yet filled out their forms took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to move away from the crowd. Those students who had already handed in their forms paled and were deeply regretful. A youth nervously looked at Qin Changxing and stammered, Sir, I just filled out the registration form. Can I return it?" "Of course you can return it." Tang 36 heard the youth's voice, but he did not turn his head. Instead, he continued to stare into Tianqin's eyes and said, "But those who withdraw at this time will no longer have the chance to enter the Orthodox Academy." Then he raised his eyebrows and smiled. "And as long as it is a student of my Orthodox Academy, I swear on His Holiness's personality that they will not be affected in the slightest by the challenge of the various schools." Hearing these words, the hands of several young students who were preparing to take back their forms instantly stopped on the table. The Orthodox Academy was actually swearing on His Holiness's name, and this person appeared so relaxed. Could it be that the matter was not as that person had said? Tianqin sneered, "Swords and blades have no eyes. So what guarantee do you have? Or are you trying to play some petty trick?" Tang 36 looked at him and said mockingly, "People like you, who don't have great wisdom, naturally see everything as small tricks." If he really was playing petty tricks, then when this person said in front of the crowd that the Orthodox Academy's recruitment had extremely evil intentions, Qin Changxing could have firmly denied it. As for what would happen after he tricked these students into entering the Orthodox Academy, that could have been discussed later. But he did not. Instead, he admitted in front of the crowd that the new students recruited by the Orthodox Academy should naturally represent the Orthodox Academy in the all-school martial exhibition. When facing those attacks that struck at the heart and were difficult to explain, magnanimity was often the mightiest weapon. This was the great wisdom of a gentleman. Reality proved that many people were willing to accept this kind of magnanimity. Some young students, after some consideration, still took back the application form from Qin Changsheng, but even more students believed in Tang 36's promise, or in other words, they didn't dare to question His Holiness's people. Although they were a little uneasy, they still continued to complete the registration process. Soon after, many more people came forward and joined the queue to register for Orthodox Academy. Realizing that his words did not have much effect, Tianqin's complexion turned somewhat gloomy. He turned to Qin Changxing and scornfully said, "In the future, if they aren't deceived, then they should thank me for what I said before. And I think that all of you should be very angry right now, having your sinister intentions exposed by me. If you want to use these students in the future, it will probably be much more troublesome." Qin Changsheng and Tang 36 glanced at each other. The Orthodox Academy's recruitment was naturally related to the pressure exerted by the Tianhai clan, but they had never once thought of using these students who had come from the provinces, counties, or even the countryside. He clearly didn't have such despicable thoughts, yet he was forcefully pinned with such a label. This was a betrayal. And this sort of statement, which did not require proof and only needed to cast the hearts of people into darkness, was the hardest to refute and the most infuriating. I know that all of you are very angry right now, but all of you can only endure because none of you are a match for me. Even that wolf cub lying in the Orthodox Academy was nothing more than a defeated opponent at my hands. Tianqin looked at Qin Changxing with an indifferent expression and asked, "And you? When are you prepared to lose to me?" Truly worthy of being called Tianqin, who can calculate the hearts of men, Tang 36 walked up to Qin Changxing and asked, "I really want to know, can you calculate what I will do next?" Tianqin slightly raised his brows and looked at him with interest. "You want to fight with me?" "I can't beat you," Tang 36 very honestly said. Tianqin was in a very good mood and laughed. "Then I presume that all you can do is taunt me a little and say a few sour words." Tang 36 shook his head. "I've never done this sort of thing." Bi Tianxin's brows rose even higher because he truly was very interested. He wanted to know just how this youth would respond to this sort of situation. Tang 36 moved in front of him, looked at him, and said very seriously, asterisk, 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 asterisk. His voice was very soft, and the hall was rather noisy, so besides him and Chen Chongsheng, only Bi Tianxin could hear him. Bi Tianxin thought that he had not heard clearly. His brow rose a little higher, and he asked in confusion, "What did you say?" I said, asterisk, 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 asterisk. His voice was louder this time, so more people heard the words. The clamor of discussion instantly vanished. The gate of the Orthodox Academy became incomparably quiet as everyone turned to look at him. This was especially true for the stewards under the canopy and the experts of the Tianhai clan. They knew of Bi Tianxin's identity and background, and their gazes at Tang 36 were filled with extreme shock. Bi Tianxin's complexion became even uglier, his eyes suddenly becoming ruthless, as if he wanted to devour someone. Tang 36 looked at him and asked seriously, "Aren't you supposed to read people's minds? Then did you ever calculate that I would say these words to you?" Bi Tianxin's pupils constricted as killing intent began to rise. His voice seeped out from between his teeth, incomparably cold. "Say it again." "Your ears aren't good." Tang 36 seemed rather surprised. Looking at him, he said, "Then this time you have to hear it clearly. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. You, mother asterisk, 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 asterisk." The gate of the Orthodox Academy was completely silent. Bi Tianxin was so angry that he actually laughed, the derision on his lips completely transforming into ice. "So it turns out that you're seeking death." Chen Chongsheng walked in front of Tang 36, blocking Bi Tianxin's line of sight. He did not like Tang 36's profanity, but when he thought of the loathsome words that he had just uttered, he had to admit that only Tang 36's response would be useful. It was said that strength could subdue 10. Filthy words could break one's wisdom. Moreover, Tang 36 was standing up for him and the Orthodox Academy, so no matter how inappropriate his words were, even if they were wrong and would bring great trouble to the Orthodox Academy, he still had to stand together with Tang 36. However, he could not say such filthy words, only calmly saying, "His words are also my stance." Then this was the stance of the Orthodox Academy. Bi Tianxin had calmed down, but he had become even more dangerous. It was like a cold sword intent was about to break through his clothes. Chen Chongsheng seemed to see Guan Bai on the street that day. A sword intent flashed through his eyes, giving off a threatening and sharp aura. "So it turns out that all of you want to die," Bi Tianxin calmly and seriously said to him. "I don't want to die." Chen Chongsheng continued, "If you hadn't provoked us first, the situation wouldn't have become so unsightly." Bi Tianxin turned to Tang 36 and smirked. "Before you said those 4 words, did you not ask around who my mother was?" A normal person who didn't know of Bi Tianxin's background would assuredly inquire about his background upon hearing these words. If they knew of his background, who would dare to say such filthy words that involved his parents? However, Tang 36 had never been a normal person. He mockingly said, "How great are the storms of the 8 directions! I know that people who say filthy words are not good children, and that there are readers who will not be satisfied with this sort of conflict. But to me, this is something that can comfort my spirit. In many places on the internet, you will encounter a certain type of wondrous person. Yes, this type of person is like Ding Crab, but he has an even more sour tone. In the past, I once tried to reason with this type of person, but later on, I realized that this was the only way to deal with this type of person. Yes, my friends who read my Weibo probably know that these 4 words are the standard words I use when cursing people. And I think that besides the last sentence, all the other filthy words will probably be replaced with beautiful and cute little stars, right? In addition, I mentioned a few days ago that many friends wanted the detailed title of the book I've been reading. Because there were too many words, I sent it to WeChat. See you tomorrow. Chapter 478. Bi Tianxin slightly narrowed his eyes, his gaze growing sharper and sharper. He had not expected that his opponent would still act so unbridled, even though he knew his background. He had come to the capital this time to take care of business, but he had unexpectedly discovered that an elder was in some trouble. In addition, he had heard the names of the Orthodox Academy and Chun Chongqing too many times in the past year, so he was very disdainful and naturally refused to accept it, so he had appeared. Guan Bai had given Chun Chongqing a year of time, but he did not have this sort of patience. As for whether this was bullying the weak or not, he did not care. It must be known that his life had always been smooth sailing, his talent outstanding, his background astonishing. No matter where he went, he was respected. Back when he was traveling through Xuanyang City, even Liang Wangsun had been polite to him. Even if that madman painted armor Xiao Zhang did not like him because of his family background, he had never truly made things difficult for him. Who could have expected that today he would encounter such an opponent that did not play by the rules? I know that you're very angry right now, but you can only endure it. What can you do? Do you think you can kill us? I just don't understand. Just what right do you have to act so high and mighty in front of us? How old is Zhixio? How old are you? How old was he several years ago? What's there to be proud of in defeating him? Think about when you were your age. Just which one of us could you defeat? The first half of these words were precisely what Bi Tianxin had said to them, and now Tang 36 returned them. Are the storms of the 8 directions very arrogant? In other places, you might be able to order them around, but I'll have to trouble you to open your eyes and see where you are. He pointed behind him at the Orthodox Academy school gate that was still brand new after a year and sneered, "This is the Orthodox Academy. This is the Wenshui Tangs. This is Su Li. This is the Orthodoxy. And this is the 3 saints." I've never liked to talk about my background because I think it's very childish, very shameful, but I just happen to be like you and like to talk about these things. The problem is, if you talk about these things, do you think you can win against us? Upon hearing these words, Bi Tianxin's face paled, because he suddenly realized that everything the other party had said was true. Even that senior had to advance step by step and be cautious in suppressing the Orthodox Academy. He had been a little impulsive. However, he was still a member of the Proclamation of Liberation and was the descendant of 2 storms. Now that he was forced into a corner by Tang 36 words, how could he retreat? His face was pale because he had thought it through, and also because he knew that he had to do something. Otherwise, his reputation and that of his family would be severely damaged. His right hand had unknowingly grasped the hilt of his sword. Chun Chongqing stood in front of Tang 36, his right hand only a short distance away from the stainless sword. He stared into Tang 36's eyes, his gaze focused and calm, showing no intention of backing down. Xian Yuan had already made his preparations for battle. He stared viciously at Bi Tianxin, his usual simple-mindedness replaced by the berserk aura of a demi-human mutation. They all knew that if Bi Tianxin moved, he would assuredly be the strongest person the Orthodox Academy had encountered since the all-school martial exhibition. Moreover, if Bi Tianxin really did attack with killing intent, no one knew what the result would be. In front of the Orthodox Academy, there was a deathly stillness. The people had already dispersed, and the atmosphere was extremely tense. Tang 36, however, was not the least bit nervous. He stepped out from behind Qin Chongsheng and said to Bi Tianxin, "Think clearly about the consequences of casually attacking here." He then turned to the Li Palace priests and Orthodoxy cavalry and yelled, "What are you standing around for? Don't you see that your future pope is about to be killed?" He had naturally shouted these words for Bi Tianxin to hear. At the tea table in the house, it was still those 2 people sitting across from each other. Truly childish. Mao Chuyu gazed at the activity going on in the distant Orthodox Academy, but it was hard to tell if he was talking about Tang 36 or Bi Tianxin. He was keenly aware that Bi Tianxin's parents had a very close relationship with Taoist Siyuan and Ling Haizhuang, just like the relationship between Zhu Luo and Guan Xinca and the deceased Archbishop Mei Lisha. He was also keenly aware that while Bi Tianxin was praised by the common people as someone who could calculate the hearts of others, in the end, he was just a young master of a noble clan who had been spoiled. Otherwise, before he appeared, how could he not have thought that these youths of the Orthodox Academy were not people he could offend? Take him away. Mao Chuyu looked at Taoist Siyuan and said, back then his parents placed him in your hands. You can't just watch as something happens to him. Taoist Siyuan's complexion was rather unsightly, but he said nothing. Standing up, he walked down the stairs. Mao Chuyu once more turned to the Orthodox Academy and shook his head. After so many years, his temper hasn't changed in the slightest. It's no wonder he's always been inferior to Guanbai. Bi Tianxin left. The Orthodox Academy had obtained victory in this struggle. In the view of many people, this struggle was particularly childish and laughable, even more childish than the mischief of a child. However, in the view of those people who knew of Bi Tianxin's true identity, this seemingly childish and laughable struggle actually explained many things. The Orthodox Academy had once more proved to the capital that it had a powerful background and hidden strength, and its power had already been established. Yes, even if one put aside the White Emperor City, represented by Princess Luoluo, one only had to talk about the Pope's attention and the relationship between Su Li and Qin Chongsheng. Other than a proper method, like the all-school martial exhibition, who had dared to break the rules and suppress the Orthodox Academy. Those foreign students from the various provinces and counties did not know of Bi Tianxin's background at the very beginning. But once they did, they couldn't help but admire Tang 36's unyielding stance and also gain a completely new understanding of the Orthodox Academy. As a result, the registration that had just paused for a few moments immediately became even more fervent. Some young students who had previously taken back their registration letters took advantage of the inattention to attempt to register again. However, they could not hide from Tang 36's eyes and were rudely driven away. Qin Chongxing commented, "Too harsh." Tang 36 replied, "I've never been one to rub sand in my eyes. I can't even bear Bi Tianxin, so why should I bear these scoundrels?" Qin Chongxing was truly very curious about this friend of his. He asked, "Have you always been this sort of person since you were small?" Tang 36 very matter-of-factly replied, "If I only had the Winshui Tangs behind me and had to face off against 2 storms of the 8 directions, I would naturally have to think about it. I might have just endured it on the spot, but don't I have you right now?" Qin Chongsheng was rendered speechless by his matter-of-factness. After a long period of silence, he said, "I've said it before, cursing isn't good. You have to control yourself." Tang 36 arched his brows. "What's not good about it? It's very refreshing, okay?" Qin Chongsheng replied, "Anger harms the liver, and it's not good for the children to hear these curses. Many people have already complained." Chapter 479. The Orthodox Academy began to accept new students for a day, and in just one day, more than 600 people had signed up. The Orthodoxy cavalry patrolled the academy. The priests of the Li Palace maintained order. The Bureau of Ecclesiastic Education personally came up with the questions, and Priest Exayan was in charge of the entire situation. Whether it was the registration or the examination on the second day, everything went smoothly. Other than the results of the examination, those who wanted to become a new student of the Orthodox Academy had to pass 2 more stages. The first was the identity examination, which was mainly handled by the Bureau of Ecclesiastic Education. With Li Palace acting, it was very easy to investigate the backgrounds of those examinees. In the end, 6 people were disqualified. The second stage was the interview, which was personally handled by Qin Chongsheng and Tang 36. As for Xian Yuanpa, he had absolutely no interest in this aspect. It could even be said that he was following by the side of that Clear Lake restaurant chef, unwilling to leave. Chun Changsheng and Tang 36 standard was also very simple. They just needed to look at the candidates' speech and behavior. Of course, the most important thing was that the candidate must be pleasing to the eye. Looking at the disqualified candidates covering their faces and leaving, Chun Changsheng thought about how he was also one of these candidates last year. He thought about how he applied to all the Ivies, but was tricked by the divine general of the East's mansion. He couldn't help but sigh at how quickly the situation changed. He actually went from a candidate to an examiner and felt a bit bad. There were 100 examinees who passed these 3 tests. These were the new students that the Tradition Academy accepted this year. What was somewhat unexpected was that the standard of these new students from Orthodox Academy was quite good. Although they came from relatively remote provinces, Jia had all successfully completed his purification and 40 or so had already completed initial meditation. Chun Changsheng even found a few students with decent talent for cultivation. But what was most surprising was that out of the 100 new students, 20 or so had transferred from other academies. Since he was shocked, the other academies mentioned here were naturally not the normal academies of the capital, but the Heavenly Tao Academy, the Temple Seminary, and the other Ivy academies that were equally famous as the Orthodox Academy. Looking at the names on the list, Priest Xian was a little worried that something might go wrong and cause trouble. Most of these students have already succeeded in their initial meditation. They're not bad compared to the students from the provinces, but they're nothing in a place like Heavenly Academy. They're definitely not valued, so they want to transfer to us. Tang 36 said, since they weren't valued in the first place, their original schools shouldn't care too much. But even if it's eaten by others, it'll still taste good. Priest Xian swallowed the indecent word with some difficulty and said, and the situation has been rather tense recently. The so-called all-school martial exhibition is actually just the Tianhai clan using their power to suppress others. It doesn't have much to do with the academies themselves. Tang 36 said, in addition, Qin Changxing is the future pope. The 6 Ivies are all under his control. What's so special about having a few students in advance? Hearing these words, and thinking of how Tang 36 had pointed at Bitianxin and cursed the 2 storms of the 8 directions at the gate of the Orthodox Academy yesterday, Priest Xian knew that Tang 36 truly did not care. Shaking his head, he no longer brought it up. Of course, the recruitment of new students was not as simple as an examination. In the next few days, the Orthodox Academy became incomparably lively. The Bureau of Ecclesiastic Education sent quite a few craftsmen to work, turning the formerly quiet campus into a bustling construction site. Fortunately, in the spring of last year, this place had already undergone a thorough renovation. The foundation had already been laid, so in a very short period of time, the entire project was smoothly completed. The Orthodox Academy had an enormous amount of unused space. There was no need to use it all. Only a small part of it was enough to accommodate these 100 new students. The small building that Chun Changxing and the others were used to living in, as well as the forest and lake that held a special meaning to them, were separated by a newly constructed wall. They still maintained their relative independence, and presumably would not be too noisy in the future. The library was protected by an array, and those books were not easy to move, so they were left outside, open to all students. The garden that was separated from the wall, near the 100-her garden and the imperial palace, now had a new name, Bee Garden. When Priest Xian heard this name for the first time, he couldn't help but ask, did this name have anything to do with that dejected Bitianxin that day? New bedding was delivered, new teaching materials for the orthodoxy were delivered. New uniforms were distributed to the hands of the new students. Smoke rose from the kitchen of the cafeteria, and water sprayed into the sky from the fountain, bringing a great deal of coolness to the scorching summer night. Everything had been prepared. The new students nervously and excitedly waited for the day of classes. Tomorrow, the Bureau of Ecclesiastic Education would send over the teachers they had chosen over the past few days. At the same time, they would also send over a large sum of money. At night, Chen Changsheng walked around the Orthodox Academy to see if there was anything out of place. Only then did he realize that the Orthodox Academy was actually so large. He had been here for an entire year, but he had actually only been in a tenth of the area. Looking at the brightly lit library, looking through the window at those students, hungrily gazing at the books of the Orthodox Academy, he felt very good. His teacher was the previous principal of the Orthodox Academy, and he was the current principal of the Orthodox Academy. The Orthodox Academy had been abandoned under his teacher's hands, but now it seemed that it was about to be truly reborn under his hands. This sort of feeling was truly very good, even though even now he still did not understand why Tang 36 had done such a thing. After returning to the small building and finishing treating Jishio, he and Tang 36 checked the list of new students one last time. To their surprise, they discovered a very familiar name and couldn't help but be shocked. Has he been here? Chun Changsheng pointed at the name and asked Tang 36. I also haven't seen him. I heard that he's still in the Mausoleum of Books. He had a junior brother from the Li Palace Academy come and sign up for him. Tang 36 asked, if you think it's against the rules, I'll have someone bring a message and tell him not to come. Qin Changxing replied, it's fine if it's another transfer student, but if he really comes, the Li Palace Academy will definitely not agree. Tang 36 said, it's not like we're crying and begging him to come, so why do you care so much? Qin Changxing thought that this was true, so he changed the subject and asked, what about Bi Tianxin's side? They were both keenly aware that Bi Tianxin had suffered such a great humiliation that day. He was assuredly holding back his anger and would seek revenge in battle. Tang 36 pointed at the pile of challenge letters on the bookshelf and said, right now there are already 134 matches waiting for us. When there are so many lice, what itch is there to be afraid of? Where did the Tianhai clan get so many experts? Chen Changsheng was somewhat confused. He thought to himself, with so many cultivators obeying the orders of the Tianhai clan, wouldn't that be enough to destroy a country? If it was one of those small countries in the northwest, the Tianhai clan could exterminate them with a wave of their hand. But if placed in the context of the entire continent, it's actually not too exaggerated. The Mount Li Sword sect would definitely be able to send so many people. Tang 36 said, and it should be about time now. Presumably, after dealing with this batch, they'll stop for a while. Chun Changxing asked, can we deal with them? Of course not. Not to mention the fact that there are experts like Bi Tianxin among them. Tang 36 said, or else why would we need to recruit so many new students? Chen Changxing thought it over, then said, it's best if we don't fight. I'm worried that there will be injuries. Tang 36 said, without experiencing battle, how can they quickly grow? Their foundations have always been poor, so it's only natural that they work even harder. In addition, this matter mainly depends on you. After saying this, the two of them took down the pile of challenge letters from the bookshelf and began to arrange them on the floor. Chen Changsheng earnestly began to calculate while Tang 36 used a pen to record on the side. They first picked out all the lower-level ethereal opening students, and then Chen Changxing chose the corresponding students to fight. As for how to choose and why to choose, Tang 36 also did not understand. Just as he had said, this matter depended on Chen Changsheng because only he knew the intellectual sword. What Chen Changsheng was currently doing was turning the hundreds-some matches of the all-school martial exhibition into one battle. His sword was all the new students of the Orthodox Academy. How those new students would fight would depend on his sword style. Seeing Chen Changsheng wholeheartedly calculating, Tang 36 suddenly felt somewhat sorrowful, saying, your fate is truly good. This was not the first time that someone had said that Chen Changxing's fate was good, and it was also not the first time that Tang 36 had said that his fate was good. Chen Changxing knew that Tang 36 was sorrowful about his fate. To be able to discover the sword pool in the Garden of Zhou, to be able to fight with those demon experts, to be able to meet Su Li to bring them south, and thus learn those 3 swords. Shaking his head, he suddenly thought of something. Raising his head to Tang 36, he asked, "Do you want to learn?" This was naturally referring to those 3 swords. In any case, when Su Li had taught him those 3 swords on the road, he had not said that he could not teach them to others. He even thought about whether or not he could arrange for those 3 swords to be a compulsory course in the Orthodox Academy. As for whether or not Su Li would be angry if he knew, that was a matter for the future. Tang 36 did not reveal an expression of pleasant surprise, nor did he show any gratitude. He looked at Chun Chongsheng like he was looking at an idiot. Chun Chongsheng asked somewhat uneasily, "What's wrong? Did I say something wrong?" Tang 36 sighed, then said, "If I weren't familiar with you, I would definitely think that you were intentionally humiliating me." Chun Chongsheng felt very wronged, thinking, how did my good intentions turn into humiliation? I can't learn those 3 swords. Tang 36 looked at him and seriously said, "So in the future, please don't bring up this matter to humiliate my intelligence, understand?" Chin Chongsheng opened his eyes wide and asked, "Why can't you learn it?" Tang 36 angrily said, "I just can't stand to see that innocent face of yours. Why can't you learn it? You ask me, and who do I ask? You think that if you can learn it, everyone in the world can learn it? Then why has Su Li only taught the 3 of you in his entire life? Besides you and Cho Shanjun, there's also his own daughter. Why doesn't he go teach the disciples and grand disciples of the Mount Li Sword sect?" At this moment, Zhixiu suddenly opened his eyes on the bed. For some reason, Tang 36 was in an extremely bad mood. He looked at him and yelled, "You know you're awake just by hearing her name? You're not playing dead anymore. Pervert." Zhixiu thought about it, then said, "Wait until I'm healed, then I'll come beat you up." Tang 36 was not afraid of him. He sneered, "Then if you have the ability, then hurry up and get better. Don't talk so much useless stuff. I'm going to talk to Chin Chongsheng so you can go sleep." Zhixiu was rather straightforward. He could pick up and let go. Seeing that they weren't talking about Qi Jian, he really did close his eyes and continue to rest. There's still one more chapter in the evening. There's a draft. It's just that heroic. Chapter 480. Chun Chongsheng understood a little, but he said somewhat uncertainly, "The 3rd sword truly is rather difficult." According to what Su Li said, he himself had not learned it, but the first 2 swords, he wanted to say that he didn't find it difficult when he was learning, but looking at Tang 36's face, he swallowed the second half of his words with difficulty. Tang 36 sneered. "The 2nd sword was clearly created by Su Li to deal with the problem of your meridians, so how can we learn it? As for the 1st sword, the calculation ability required is too strong. Do you think anyone can do it?" Chun Chongsheng thought to himself that Lady Chu Jian's calculation ability was much stronger than his. Tang 36 looked at him and asked seriously, "Chun Chongsheng, do you really not know that you are a genius?" Chun Chongsheng thought about it. His memory was not bad. As for his ability to calculate, it had probably been greatly strengthened when he was viewing the monoliths in the mausoleum of books. As for being a genius, he shook his head. Tang 36 said, "When I first met you in the Heavenly Academy, what did I say?" Chun Chongsheng said, "You said, I'm a genius." Tang 36 patted him on the shoulder and said, "Believe me, I have never misjudged a person." Chun Chongsheng thought about it and didn't know how to respond. Tang 36 said, "Right, you have to teach me the true sword of the orthodoxy and the toppling mountain staff." Chun Chongsheng didn't understand and asked, "You're not even willing to take a look at the fundamental method of Lishan sword arts. Why do you want to learn this?" "I'm a student of the Tradition Academy, so of course I have to learn the sword arts of the Tradition Academy." "What's the point of learning the Li Mountain sword arts?" Tang 36 looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. He had long forgotten that he had just praised him as a genius. Besides, since I'm going to be the supervisor, I'll be a laughingstock if I don't know these two sword techniques. The true sword of the orthodoxy was a foundational sword technique that every expert of the Orthodox Academy had to grasp. Its power was not weak, but there were not many sword techniques. As for the toppling mountain staff, it was actually not a sword technique, but a staff technique used by the teachers in charge of maintaining discipline in the Orthodox Academy to punish disobedient students. Yes, Chen Changsheng would be the principal of the new Tradition Academy, and Tang 36 would be the first superintendent of the new Tradition Academy. The logistics manager of the new Orthodox Academy was Xian Yuan Po. Zhixiu was still recovering from his injuries, but his duties had already been arranged ahead of time. In the future, he would be responsible for teaching the students of the Orthodox Academy how to fight and how to survive in the snowy plains of the land of demons. Of course, the Orthodox Academy still had a very noble position left for Luo Luo, the lifelong honorary vice principal. And the new academy rules clearly stated that in the future, the Orthodox Academy would no longer have the position of vice principal. One day in the middle of summer, there was a sea of people outside 100 Blossom Street, and inside 100 Blossom Street, colorful flags fluttered. After 20 years, the Orthodox Academy had finally reopened. To many of the elders of the Orthodoxy, this was a grand occasion. Who knew how many old priests of the Li Palace had their lapels wet with tears? For the Bureau of Traditional Education, this was the greatest legacy left by the late Lord Bishop. It was also their greatest wish. All the clergymen and staff were happy, but they also felt a little sad. To the imperial clan, after many years of silence, this was finally their voice to the continent. Although Chen Changsheng and Tang 36 definitely did not think this way, this did not affect Prince Qinlu, who came to attend the ceremony, completely forgetting that so many eyes were watching him and that the divine empress might soon learn of the danger. His hand stroked the green tree, filled with emotion. To the 100 new students of the Orthodox Academy, this was a brand new beginning in their lives, and also their greatest opportunity. To the Tianhai clan and the new faction of the Orthodoxy, this was a rather dangerous signal. But to MOU, this was a joke. It's fine if you're the principal. In any case, it's His Holiness the Pope's sacred words that decide everything. It's fine if you're Princess Luoluo. In any case, it's just an empty title. But Tang Tang, that guy who can't even control himself, is actually the Academy's supervisor? Don't you think that the most likely possibility is that he'll get the students drunk and then skip class every day? That black bear as the logistics manager? Aren't you worried that the chef of Clear Lake Restaurant, for the sake of money, will make a large pot of food that will be eaten by him alone? MOU looked at Qin Changsheng and laughed like a flower. The funniest thing is Zhixiu, teaching the students how to survive. When the time comes, he'll bury the students in a pile of snow. If they come out before 7 days, they'll fail. Hey, I say, just how many coffins did you prepare? This was Chen Changsheng's room in the small building. He sat across from her, looking rather tired, mainly because too many things had happened today. Of course, it also had something to do with her laughing to her heart's content. MOU had naturally come to the Orthodox Academy today to watch the excitement and at the same time to watch the joke. She had not formally appeared, only waiting for everything to conclude before quietly appearing in his room. But for some reason, she had clearly put on meticulous makeup before coming. She seemed even more exquisite and beautiful than usual, even a little radiant and moving. From the principal to the academy supervisor, there's actually not a single person in charge of the Orthodox Academy that's over 20. Are you all playing house? MOU laughed even more happily, the golden flower stuck in her black hair, trembling even more fiercely. Isn't this because you all forced me? Chen Changsheng did not want to hear her continue jeering, so he changed the subject and asked, "Why are you dressed so formally today? Something happened in the court?" MOU was a little startled. She thought to herself that she usually dressed like this. How was it strange? Suddenly, She remembered that other than the first time they met in the night palace, most of the time she met Qin Changxing was at night, and it was usually when she wanted to come over and sleep on his bed, or she had already fallen asleep on his bed. At that time, she obviously did not put on any makeup or clothes. She would come over after washing up. With no makeup on, it must be very different from now. Thinking about these things, she felt a little embarrassed. When she remembered that last time Qin Changxing told her to wash up before getting on his bed, she couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. She glared at him and flew out of the window with the wind, disappearing into the forest just like that. Qin Changxing thought confusedly. Tang 36 was right. Women were indeed the most difficult people to understand in the world. He clearly didn't say anything. So why was she suddenly unhappy? He did not lie to MOU. The main reason why the Tradition Academy decided to recruit new students was because the Tian Hai family and the new faction of the tradition were giving too much pressure. There were too many people who wanted to challenge the Tradition Academy. But that day at the gate of the Tradition Academy, Bi Tianqin's words accusing them of having evil intentions and Tang 36's subsequent promise had already spread far and wide. Therefore, many people, including the 100 new students, wanted to know what the Tradition Academy would do next. On the morning of the second day, the matches that had stopped for several days began again. The citizens of the capital who had rested for several days spread the news. They brought the old and the young back to the Tradition Academy. The gate of the Tradition Academy once again became very lively. Last night, Qin Changxing had already drafted the list of matches and had given pointers to the new students. He had used up too much mental energy, so he did not enter the field and instead rested in the academy. Tang 36 brought 30 new students and stood in front of the gate of the Tradition Academy. Not to mention anything else, just by looking at the uniform of the new students, one would feel that they were very energetic and full of vigor. At this moment, the first person to challenge the Tradition Academy had already walked onto the field. He clasped his hands and said, "Please enlighten me." This person came from Li Palace College and had already reached the lower stage of ethereal opening. He really wanted to know who the Tradition Academy would send to fight against him. Of course, he knew that he was no match for Qin Changxing and the others. But looking at the current situation, it was obvious that the Tradition Academy would send new students to fight. But among the new students standing behind Tang 36, no one had reached ethereal opening. Why would they come out to fight? Tang 36 didn't care about what this person and the people outside were thinking. He looked at the list in his hand and said, "Qin Fugui, step out." As soon as he finished speaking, a new student squeezed out from behind his classmates. This new student was not old, but his body was extremely sturdy and strong. He looked like a smaller version of Xian Yuanpa. Tang 36 didn't waste any time. He pointed at the challenger from Li Palace College and said to him, "Can you beat him?" The new student, named Qin Fugui, heavily patted his chest and said, "You have to fight to know. You have guts." Tang 36 seemed to be praising him, but his face did not show any excitement. He said cleanly, "Then go fight." "Okay." The new student, named Qin Fugui, roared and jumped down from the stone stairs. Like a tiger coming out of the mountains, he leaped towards the challenger from Li Palace College. The challenger was shocked by the momentum. He thought to himself, "Is this a hidden elite of the Tradition Academy?" He thought to himself, looking at the new student's momentum. He suddenly thought of Princess Luo Luo from the Tradition Academy and the White Emperor's most terrifying technique. His spirit couldn't help but become a little messed up. He felt that this was very similar to the martial arts of the legends and subconsciously felt a little timid. Before a battle, the most important thing was to stay calm. At this moment, his spirit was slightly messed up and his breathing was also messed up. His movements inevitably slowed down. The new student's fist, which was as big as a bowl, was already in front of him. He was worried that there was some powerful technique hidden behind this fist, so he didn't dare to take it head-on. He quickly retreated. But because he retreated in a hurry, he couldn't completely escape the range of the new student's fist. The side of his face was hit by the fist, and it felt a little hot. This hot pain made him completely awake. He was shocked to find that although the new student's fist technique seemed to be violent, it clearly only had the form and not the intent. Moreover, the true essence in the two bowl-sized fists was pitifully weak. This was just a normal student who had just entered the first meditation realm. Yet he acted as if he was facing a great enemy and almost lost. The challenger from Lee Palace College was enraged. He was angry at his own stupidity and his opponent's weak momentum. With a loud roar, he slashed his sword forward. "Stop!" At this moment, a voice rang out. It was very calm but very powerful, as if something very important, or at least something many times more important than this battle, had happened. The sword of the challenger from Lee Palace College stopped in midair and looked towards the source of the voice. Chapter 481. Tang 36 walked down from the stone steps and stood next to the freshman named Chen Fugue. He looked at him and nodded. "Your performance was not bad. In the future, you will learn this running tiger in the dark forest." Hearing this, Chen Fugue was slightly startled before he reacted. His face was filled with ecstasy as he said in a trembling voice, "Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Superintendent." Tang 36 turned around to look at the dozens of new students and said, "Do you see? This is what I said last night. In a battle between two armies, the most important thing is momentum. Whether you are a match for the enemy or not, you have to fight to know. Moreover, before you make a move, you absolutely cannot think that you are inferior to the other party. As the saying goes, it is better to be beaten to death than to be scared to death. There is also the saying, if you can't beat someone to death, you have to scare them to death." The new students of the Orthodox Academy responded in unison, their voices extremely orderly. They looked at Chen Fugue with eyes filled with envy and yearning. The challenger from the Lee Palace College was completely baffled by this scene. Finally, he could not help but ask, "What's going on? Don't you want to fight anymore?" Tang 36 asked Chen Fugue, "Can you beat him?" He had asked this question before the battle began. At that time, Chen Fugue said that how would he know if he could win if he had not fought before. Now that he had fought, he honestly admitted, "I can't beat him." Don't be discouraged. You've only been in the initial reflection realm for less than 2 months. So of course you're no match for someone in the ethereal opening realm. It's not like you're a peerless genius like me or the principal. Tang 36 reached out his hand and patted his thick shoulder. He comforted him. "You should summarize today's battle tonight and prepare for your future studies." The spectators thought to themselves that the battle had just begun and nothing had been done. What was there to conclude? The challenger from the Lee Palace Academy looked at Chen Fugue, who was walking back up the stone steps and was also somewhat at a loss. He looked at Tang 36 and asked, "And then?" The battle had just begun, and he hadn't even had time to draw his sword before he was called to stop. Then, shouldn't they continue fighting? Tang 36 looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot and said, "If I can't win, of course, I admit defeat." The challenger from the Lee Palace College was truly dumbfounded. After staring blankly for a long time, he came to his senses and asked in disbelief, "It can't be? That's it? What else? You still want to stay for dinner? Our Orthodox Academy's cafeteria even invited a chef from Clear Lake Restaurant. Normal people can forget about freeloading." With these words, Tang 36 walked towards the gate of the Tradition Academy to prepare for the second match. The challenger from Lee Palace College was enraged. His aura abruptly rose, and the sword in his hand began to emit a chill. Tang 36 stopped and turned around to look at him. He said, expressionlessly, "Try taking another step forward." Tang 36 stopped and turned. 66366 to him. 2 Tang Palace. 1622 and 1212. Only now did the crowd of spectators understand what the Orthodox Academy was preparing to do. With a boom, they began to clamor, but in the next moment they were suppressed back by the killing intent that enveloped the entire field. The Tradition Academy is going to act shamelessly. Chin, the 36, said, Tian Academy, the Academy you. 30 Fugue. One another. At. Someone. A someone. Came. A 6. A 36 came. Another Chin. And when 6 came, 8 was that young student who had been so confident on the day of the Orthodox Academy's recruitment. Tang 36 looked at him and said, Amongst your classmates, your cultivation is the strongest. Perform well, and let those outsiders see the true strength of our Orthodox Academy. Fu Xinji clasped his hands in greeting. He slowly unsheathed his long sword and walked onto the field, his bearing very steady. The challenger from the Li Palace Fugue was still standing on the field. From beginning to end, no one paid any attention to him. Alone, he seemed rather pitiful, rather laughable. He was clearly the victor of this battle, but where did he feel any sense of victory? He shot a hateful glare at Tang 36, then brushed his sleeve and left. Following him was another swordsman at the middle level of ethereal opening. Tang 36 could no longer remember which school he was representing. He only knew that Chen Changsheng had clearly explained to him last night that Fu Xinji's opponent could only be this swordsman. Moreover, Chen Changsheng had left a very detailed note on the roster, explaining how Fu Xinji should use his sword and how many swords he could use at most. Time passed rather slowly, or perhaps it was better to say that the first match had ended too quickly. It was still early in the morning. Although it was the height of summer, it was not very hot. Fu Xinji gripped his sword and stood on the flat ground in front of the Orthodox Academy's gate, allowing the cool breeze to curl around him and lift up his sleeves. He seemed rather otherworldly. His opponent was also a swordsman. His blue robe reflected the morning light, the edge of his sword slightly cold. He also seemed to have an excellent demeanor. Seeing this scene, the crowd that had still been somewhat depressed by the absurd conclusion of the last match instantly raised their spirits. The swordsman expressionlessly said, Please. Fu Xinji gazed at his opponent's face in the morning light. He seemed calm, but in reality only he knew how nervous he was. He was a student from Suiyang County. He was not like the students of the capital who could receive knowledge of cultivation from a young age. Although his talent was not bad, his strength had never been too high. As for fighting ability in Suiyang County, he had never truly fought with anyone. Today was the first true battle of his life, and his opponent was a middle-level ethereal opening expert that he could not even imagine in Suiyang County, someone that he could only regard as a senior and expert. How could he not be nervous? He could not be nervous. This was what Principal Chen had repeated the most last night. The most important thing was momentum. Momentum was not only in ferocity, but also in calmness. The academy's supervisor had been repeating this principle from morning class until now. In his mind, he once again memorized the positions, speeds, and methods to circulate true essence that Principal Chen had told him last night. Then he took a deep breath. He calmed down, and then he struck. With a whoosh, a storm seemed to suddenly rise in front of the Orthodox Academy's gate. The first move of the wind and rain sword of Mountain Zhong, rising pale yellow. His sword passed through the storm with incredible speed and arrived in front of the swordsman. The swordsman was still expressionless. His sword left the sheath, and his true essence surged forth, shaking Fu Xinji's sword off its original trajectory. Fu Xinji did not panic. For some reason, it was just like what Chen Changsheng and Tang 36 had said to all the new students last night. When he struck out with his first strike, the reverence he usually had for ethereal opening cultivators in Suiyang County disappeared without a trace. Moreover, he had practiced the current situation several times last night. His sword just happened to be in that position, the position that Principal Chen had calculated. That position was very good very good for the fifth move of the wind and rain, sword of the Zhong family. He focused his mind and calmed his qi. The momentum of his sword suddenly increased, and the storm gradually grew stronger. From the side, he once again stabbed towards his opponent. At the same time, he counted in his mind, this is the second strike. Last night, Principal Qin said that if he could use 4 sword moves in front of this powerful opponent today, then it would be considered a success. Crack, 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 crack. The sword light flashed incessantly and then disappeared without a trace. The storm in front of the Orthodox Academy also disappeared without a trace. What remained was a clear sky and the approaching summer heat. The swordsman still stood expressionlessly in his original position, not moving at all. There was no wound on his body, only an extremely small tear in the front of his blue robe. Fu Xinji gripped his sword, his chest slightly rising and falling. An extremely deep sword wound had appeared on his left shoulder, and blood was constantly flowing out. But it was as if he could not feel the pain. His eyes were very bright, and he seemed especially excited. Of course, he could not win. Although he was the strongest person in this batch of new students, the gap between him and ethereal opening cultivators was still insurmountable. But he struck out 4 times. This was the most important matter, and it was also the matter that Chan Changsheng hoped he could accomplish. So not only did he not feel any sense of defeat, he even felt a sense of heroism. He hadn't even been in the Orthodox Academy for 5 days, but he could actually strike out 4 times in front of an ethereal opening expert. Then, if he studied a little longer in the Orthodox Academy, just how far would he be able to go? He looked into the swordsman's eyes and thought to himself, next year, as long as next year, I will definitely be able to truly defeat you. What are you still standing there for? Tang 36's voice rang out in front of the Orthodox Academy's gate. Fu Xinji came to his senses and sheathed his sword. He bowed to the swordsman and then walked back. The swordsman was not as angry as the challenger from the Li Palace Academy, nor did he attempt to stop him. And it was very obvious that this had nothing to do with the Orthodoxy cavalry or the crossbow bolts on the wall. Tang 36 looked at the returning Fu Xinji and said, according to last night's calculations, if you wanted to use all 4 of these sword moves, you truly would have been injured, but it wouldn't have been so severe. Fu Xinji walked back. Only then did his schoolmates clearly see how deep the wound was, so deep that one could even faintly see the bone. I used a little deeper in that last strike, he nervously said, because I really wanted to try and see if I could stab my opponent. His last strike had not been able to stab into his opponent's body, only leaving an extremely small hole in his opponent's clothes. If one did not look carefully, they would not even be able to see it. Tang 36 looked at him and asked, "Do you think it was worth it?" To use a sword wound so deep that bone could be seen to trade for a small hole in his opponent's clothes. Anyone would think that this was not worth it. But Fu Xinji seriously thought it over, then said, I think it was worth it. If you think it was worth it, then it was worth it. Tang 36 smiled and said with satisfaction, For example, if I think you're pretty good, then you're really not bad. At this moment, the swordsman's voice suddenly came from the field. For some reason, the swordsman's voice was trembling, perhaps out of fear or excitement. Excellent sword style. As he said this, he was not looking at Fu Xinji, but at Tang 36. It was not fear, but excitement. Even the shock of seeing the beautiful scenery of a famed mountain and sea of clouds. With Fu Xinji's cultivation, the fact that he could learn the wind and rain sword of Mount Zhong, even if it was only 2 moves, was already shocking enough. But this swordsman's shock and praise did not come from this. What truly shocked him was the person who had taught Fu Xinji this sword style. Chapter 482. This swordsman was at the middle level of ethereal opening. Logically speaking, a casual strike from a meditation realm youth should have been enough to defeat him. But Fu Xinji's first strike had come too quickly, forcing him to first adopt a defensive stance. And just when he was prepared to switch from defense to offense, Fu Xinji's second strike arrived, still very fast. For it to be so fast meant that there was no pause between Fu Xinji's two strikes. And logically speaking, it was very difficult to link the first and fifth moves of the wind and rain sword of Mountain Zhong together, much less so smoothly. The problem was that his sword had jolted Fu Xinji's sword upwards. It was precisely this position, precisely this angle, that allowed Fu Xinji's two strikes to be as fast as lightning. He had seen the wind and rain sword of Mountain Zhong, but he had never imagined that it could be used in this manner. What shocked him even more were Fu Xinji's third and fourth strikes. Those two sword techniques were the true swords of the orthodoxy. How could the wind and rain sword of Mountain Zhong be transformed into the true swords of the orthodoxy so smoothly? And it even gave off a feeling of wondrous perfection. It was clearly not a sword style, so why did it seem like a chain of swords created by those great sects of the sword over 1,000 years? To this swordsman, these four strikes were truly too wondrous, too frightening. He was keenly aware that if Fu Xinji's cultivation was not far below his, he truly would have no idea how to deal with these four strikes. To put it another way, if Fu Xinji could break into ethereal opening, even if he was an entire level lower than him, he could still use these four strikes to threaten him. These four strikes were naturally not something that a new student from a province who had just entered the orthodoxy could think of. And when Fu Xinji changed his sword techniques just now, it seemed like he had accurately predicted the situation. But it was even more obvious that someone had already planned it out for him. Who could have predicted all the details of today's clash of swords and come up with such a perfect solution? When the swordsman thought that there was such a person in the world, he felt his entire body go cold and hot. When he thought that someone had actually reached this step on the path of the sword, he became extremely excited. He wanted nothing more than to drink to his heart's content. "This is Principal Chen's sword style?" he asked Tang 36 in a trembling voice. Tang 36 said yes. The swordsman was silent for a long time before he calmed down from the shock. He sighed and said, "I've heard the story of him and Go Han Shi discussing swords at last year's Ivy League gathering. Every time I heard the details, I always felt that the narrator was exaggerating and exaggerating. After all, he was only in the meditation state at that time. Only now do I know that there are people who are born with knowledge of the way of the sword." Hearing these words, Tang 36 naturally remembered the scene from last year's Ivy Festival. He was also very emotional and said, "Don't tell me you don't believe me. At that time he said that I would be responsible for drawing the sword. But before I drew the sword, I didn't believe that he could help me defeat Qi Jian, but that guy did it." The swordsman sighed with emotion again. Such talent in sword arts is really amazing. I'll pass on your compliments to him, but he definitely won't admit that he's a genius in the sword Tao. Tang 36 said, "He will only say that he is more diligent and has a better memory." The swordsman froze at these words, thinking even a blind person can see this kind of talent in the sword Tao, so how could he deny it? He didn't know what to say. I also think that his appearance when he said those words was very infuriating. Yes, sometimes even more infuriating than me. Tang 36 clasped his hands to the swordsman. The swordsman nodded and returned to the back of the crowd, but he did not stand with the Tianhai clan experts. Instead, he continued to walk even further into the distance. He believed that he would walk very far until he crossed the bridge of helplessness, walked out of the city gate, and then went to an even vaster world. Today, he finally saw that the path of the sword was as vast as the sea. How could he stay in a small city like the capital? Soon the third match began. The expert challenging the Orthodox Academy had a gloomy expression. He was clearly not a kind person, and he did not conceal the killing intent in his eyes. The one representing the Orthodox Academy was a student from the Heavenly Tao Academy called Chu Wenbin. "Senior, the situation doesn't seem right." Chu Wenbin looked at the expert and whispered uneasily, He used to be a student of the Heavenly Tao Academy, and Tang 36 also used to be a student of the Heavenly Tao Academy. They had always known each other, and now that they had both become students of the Orthodox Academy, although they couldn't be said to be fellow sufferers sympathizing with each other, they at least had a different kind of relationship. In his nervousness, he habitually called Tang 36 Senior, even forgetting to call him Academy Superintendent. Tang 36, who cared deeply about this matter, was not very angry. "What's wrong?" Tang 36 leaned to the side and asked. Chu Wenbin timidly glanced at the field and said, "That person seems rather fierce." Tang 36 said, "Last night, Chen Chongxing taught you a move specifically to deal with this person. If your luck is good, you might be able to take advantage of him, even if you're afraid. You can't switch out at the last moment." Feeling helpless, Chu Wenbin raised his sword and walked down the stone steps. The gloomy expert looked at Chu Wenbin, whose skin was as white as a woman's and revealed a sinister and indescribable smile. It turns out there really are people who aren't afraid of death. Chu Wenbin was badly frightened by this smile. He turned to Tang 36 and said, "Senior, he's trying to scare me." Tang 36 arched his brows and said to the expert, "I say, if you want to fight, then fight. What nonsense are you spouting?" The expert's smile vanished, and he said with a threatening chill, "Does the Orthodox Academy now not even dare to listen to a word of truth?" Tang 36 said, "If you have the ability, then beat him to death for me to see." Chu Wenbin was shocked by these words, thinking, "Senior, these words of yours are very handsome and full of vigor, but my life is my own." The expert sneered, "So what if I beat him to death?" Tang 36 slightly pursed his lips. Just like Chen Chongxing in Clear Lake Restaurant, he could also clearly sense this person's killing intent. The rules of the all-school martial exhibition do not say that you can beat someone to death. He expressionlessly said to the expert, "If you want to break the rules, I naturally have a way of playing that doesn't follow the rules." The expert began to laugh. Paired with his pale complexion and gloomy eyes, his smile seemed particularly frightening. "A few days ago, my young master said that swords and sabers have no eyes." Upon hearing these words, the crowd realized that this person was actually Bi Tianxin's subordinate, or perhaps a servant. Although he was just a subordinate, or even a servant, to be able to walk the world with Bi Tianxin and make those two storms of the 8 directions feel at ease, this person was assuredly extremely powerful and terrifying. "Swords and sabers have no eyes, and you're not blind." Tang 36 looked at him and said, "If it's inappropriate, I will naturally shout for you to stop." The servant from the Bi clan smirked. "Why should I stop just because young Master Tang says so? Besides, these students of your Orthodox Academy are too weak. If I were to fight normally, it would be normal for me to slip up and kill him." "Slip up?" Tang 36's brows rose up like a sword about to be unsheathed. The servant from the Bi clan seemed to be very kind as he explained, "Slip up means that you can't stop. You're right. The new students of our Orthodox Academy are naturally still relatively weak. But to them, you are unquestionably experts. When the strong bully the weak, people still can't stop." Tang 36 looked at him and very calmly said, "Then I might as well ask your entire family to stop." The expression of the servant from the Bi clan shivered. "Sir should be well aware that I am a person of the Bi clan." "Of course I know that you are a servant of the Bi clan, Yi Xingqing." Tang 36 looked at him and said, "But your own family is in Shannon County. Relying on the power of the Bi clan, you bully men and take women, committing all sorts of crimes, occupying tens of thousands of mu of good farmland. I hear that your son is even a county official?" Upon hearing these words, the expression of the servant from the Bi clan called Yi Xingqing suddenly changed. He harshly rebuked, "What do you mean by that?" "What I mean is that I know who you are." Tang 36 no longer looked at him. Turning to those experts behind the crowd that had come to challenge the Orthodox Academy on the orders of the Tianhai clan, he said, "All of you, I know who you are, so if you want to fight, then fight. But if someone really wants to make this matter bigger and say some nonsense like you can't stop, then I can only ask your entire family to stop." Then he turned back to Yi Xingqing and asked, "Now, do you understand? There are many things in this world that could be stopped, such as the sword or words or one's future or even one's fate." When he said these words, he was very calm, completely devoid of his usual arrogant and pompous air. Only in this way could everyone present know that he was speaking the truth, not just some harsh words. Yes, not even the Orthodox Academy could do anything to the Bee clan. After all, it represented 2 storms of the 8 directions. But Yi Xingqing was still just a servant of the Bee clan. He had his own home, his own family, so when he threatened the Orthodox Academy, he should have clearly thought it through. The Orthodox Academy could very easily threaten him. After Tang 36 clearly said these words, Yi Xingqing finally understood, causing his complexion to become abnormally unsightly. "Senior, you're truly extraordinary." Chu Wenbin's timidity gradually receded, and he happily said to Tang 36, "At any other time, Tang 36 would assuredly be very happy to be praised in such a manner, but he did not right now, because he knew that this matter would not end here. Most importantly, back at the gate of the Orthodox Academy, he had said to the entire capital that he would absolutely not let this match affect these new students, so he did not want to take any risks. The arrangements he and Chen Chongsheng had made last night had come to a temporary end. Although it was somewhat different from the original plan, he still decided to personally take action. Just then, a person walked out of the crowd. This person walked to the gate of the Orthodox Academy and said, "Let me fight this match." This was a quiet and noble young student, but he also gave off an upright and solemn aura. Tang 36 looked at him and asked, "How come you've gotten so much darker?" The young student glanced at him and slowly replied, "You know, the pavilions behind those monoliths are a little small and can't block out the sun." The sword comes out of the mouth. This refers to Qin Chongxing and also to Tang 36. In addition, I would like to report something to everyone. In the past half a year, I haven't controlled my diet and I've been drinking too much. As a result, my gout relapsed. It's not serious, but it hurts. From now on, I've become a vegetarian. Of course, there's medicine, so don't worry. I still have chapters, so there's no reason for me to stop updating. Please be at ease. Everyone must take care of their bodies. When it comes to exercising more, it's never too much. You must do it, but don't feel too pressured. We must have revolutionary optimism. Although my gout hurts, I can lose weight while I'm at it. I suddenly remembered that I have to seriously thank Taoist Kung. He's the author of Seiya's manga. When I was in a bad mood because of my illness, I saw Seiya's manga posted on Yaoqi. As a result, I read it from beginning to end. It's really good. Then I still felt that I wasn't satisfied, so I began to reread Seiya's novel. I discovered that it's really good. I recommend everyone to read Seiya's manga and then reread the novel. Just search for Seiya on Yaoqi and you'll find it. Or everyone can search on my Weibo. Manga is really fun. This is definitely not an advertisement. Chapter 483. Tang 36 looked down and couldn't help but laugh. He asked, "Then why are your hands still so white?" The young student replied, "Later I figured it out. I hid my hands in my sleeves so they couldn't be exposed to the sun, so they naturally turned back to their original color." Tang 36 examined him and felt the faint aura emanating from his body. He said with slight surprise, "Not bad. You've actually reached the middle level of ethereal opening." The young student said politely, "Thank you for your compliment, but it's just SOSO." Tang 36 said, "Don't worry. Although you are still a little bit weaker than me, it's still not bad." The young student was slightly startled. Although he and Tang 36 had interacted a lot in the Grand Examination and the Mausoleum of Books, he was still not used to it. He thought about it and said, "You are lucky." Tang 36 sneered, "When I left the Mausoleum of Books, I was truly at the upper level of ethereal opening. You were a month behind me when you were only at the middle level of ethereal opening. What does this have to do with luck?" The young student thought about it again and said, "What you said makes sense. I am indeed inferior to you." This austere student with a refined and noble air was the most promising student of Lee Palace Academy in the past few years, Su Mou. Back then, Su Mou had once doubted Qin Changsheng on the divine avenue of Lee Palace. But when he discovered that his doubts were unfounded, he quickly realized his mistake and solemnly apologized. In the grand examination, he had also traveled with the people of Orthodox Academy for a long period of time. His talent was indeed outstanding, but due to his luck with the lots, he wasn't able to progress very far. Afterwards, when everyone entered the Mausoleum of Books to view the monoliths and comprehend the Tao, Qin Changsheng and the others left one after another. A month ago, even Tang 36, Go Hanshi, and the other disciples of Mount Li had left. Only Su Mou, for some unknown reason, continued to stay in the Mausoleum of Books to view the monoliths. After Qin Changsheng and the others found out about this, they were even somewhat worried that this somewhat inflexible and wooden fellow would really be attracted by the heavenly toe monoliths and would no longer be willing to leave the Mausoleum of Books and become a monolith guardian. Tang 36 looked at Su Mou and asked, "Are you sure you want to fight this match?" Su Mou looked at Yi Xingqing and said, "I should be the one to fight this match." Tang 36 did not understand the hidden meaning in these words. Su Mou and the already suicidal Zhuang Huanyu were the same. They were both the most outstanding students of the 6 IVs and were also famous in the capital. It was only during this year that Qin Changsheng and Orthodox Academy had stolen much of his limelight, but there were still many people in the capital who recognized him. As the news spread, the crowd discussed amongst themselves. Not only were they not shocked, but they were also confused, wondering when did he become a student of Orthodox Academy? As Yi Xingqing heard these discussions, for some reason, his complexion became somewhat unsightly. He looked at Su Mou and asked with some hesitation, Aren't you a student of the Lee Palace Academy?" Tang 36 didn't notice that he used a respectful title for Su Mou and said, "Oh, he already signed up for the Orthodox Academy." Then he turned to Su Mou and asked, "Are you confident?" This question was not superfluous. After all, Yi Xingqing was not an ordinary servant. He was a servant trained by the 2 storms of the 8 directions. Su Mou had chosen to leave the Mausoleum of Books because, compared to before, both his cultivation and strength had definitely risen. But he was still not a match for this person. Tang 36 had previously prepared to act himself, not only because he thought that only the Winshui Tangs could resist the other families, but also because he had considered this. Su Mou, you seem to have thought of something and did not respond. Tang 36 thought it over, then said, "Although he is a servant of the other families, his technique does not follow the path of those 2 powerful figures, but rather the path of the Putian Star River." Su Mou was somewhat shocked. It seemed that this was his first time hearing of this matter. Yi Xingqing did not care that the details of his technique had been exposed. He only looked at Su Mou with unease. The Putian Star River walks a strange and sinister path. 2 days ago, when the Bureau of Ecclesiastic Education brought the information over, Qin Changxing studied it and drew up a few plans. Tang 36 pointed at Chu Wenbin, who had already retreated to the stone steps, and said, "If he were to use this plan, he would only be able to hold out for a while. But since you're the one acting, you should be able to defeat him." After saying this, he did not wait for Su Mou to say anything and directly explained all of Qin Changxing's plans. The area in front of the Orthodox Academy grew quiet. Only his voice could be heard. If words could be said to contain swords, then his words were the swords Qin Changxing had prepared for Yi Xingqing. Just like in the previous 2 matches, the commoners of the capital who had come to watch the excitement naturally did not understand. The Li Palace priests and the experts who had come to challenge the Orthodox Academy grew more and more silent as they listened. Yi Xingqing's face gradually paled. Qin Changxing's swords were hidden in Tang 36's words, directly piercing through the characteristics of his technique and accurately finding his weakness. And now, countless people had heard these words. It did not matter how many swords there were, as long as they were sharp enough. Qin Changxing's plan was also very simple, as long as it was effective. It didn't take long for Tang 36 to finish. The area in front of the Orthodox Academy was still quiet, even deathly still. Only after a long time had passed did Suemoyu sigh, "I'm inferior to him." This was a sigh that came from the bottom of his heart. It was also what many people were thinking. "Do you have confidence now?" Tang 36 asked. Suemoyu gave him a strange glance, then said, "I said I was inferior to Qin Changxing. When did I say I had no confidence in this battle?" Tang 36 thought to himself, "Then why didn't you respond to my words just now?" In truth, even if Suemoyu had said he was confident, he would still have found an opportunity to speak of the plan Qin Changxing had prepared last night. The common people had always believed that Qin Changxing's ability to cultivate to such a level at such a young age was primarily due to his background in the orthodoxy and those fortuitous encounters. As a result, they had underestimated his talent in cultivation and his diligence. He felt that this was wrong. He believed that Qin Changxing's genius was worthy of praise and even reverence. There was another very important reason, and that was that he did not like Yi Xingqing, so he wanted to expose the secrets and weaknesses of his cultivation technique in broad daylight. "Then go fight," Tang 36 said to Suemoyu. "Fight until even his young master can't recognize him." As a former genius of the Li Palace Academy and someone who had spent half a year in the mausoleum of books viewing the monoliths, Suemoyu was already rather powerful. Coupled with the fact that he had used Qin Changxing's plan without any mental barriers, and the fact that Yi Xingqing's performance in this battle was far below what people imagined, this battle unsurprisingly ended with Suemoyu's victory. As for whether Yi Xingqing had been beaten until even his young master couldn't recognize him, one would have to ask Tianxin himself. In any case, based on what Suemoyu had said, he probably couldn't recognize him. The conclusion of the third match was also very quick. Including the time taken to speak with those people, it was not very long. The morning light had just faded and the blazing sun was about to rise. Tang 36 brought Suemoyu and the several dozen new students back to the Orthodox Academy, leaving only the tightly shut gate to those unsatisfied populace and those speechless challengers. The reason Tang 36 used was very simple. Friends had returned from the mausoleum of books, so they had to first eat a feast and reminisce about old times. As for a minor matter like the all-school martial exhibition, they could continue after eating. Many students sat on the grass by the lake, books in their hands as they read. Not far away, under a nearby tree were Clear Lake Restaurant's famous rose ice cubes, which the students casually scooped up. Seeing this scene, Suemoyu was very sorrowful. "This is a little too extravagant." Tang 36 replied, "You won't regret joining the Orthodox Academy." In front of the grass, by the lake, was a clearly newly built wall. This wall was rather short, unable to block out the scenery within, and of course it was even less capable of blocking out the great banyan tree. It could only serve as a barrier. The forest on the other side of the short wall was even denser and more secluded. There were not many people around. Hidden in the green forest was a small building. Qin Changxing was waiting in front of the building. He looked at Suemoyu and said, "You've come." Suemoyu noticed his complexion and said, "You seem very tired." Qin Changxing truly was very tired. In the past few days, he had been studying those opponents, searching for flaws, guiding the new students of the Orthodox Academy, and coming up with plans. In reality, this was equivalent to constantly using the intellectual sword. Moreover, he was in a rush to re-enter the Garden of Zhou, and every night he had to undergo many attempts. The consumption of his spiritual sense was too severe, and he was on the verge of collapse. You can say it now. Tang 36 looked at Su Mou and asked, "Why did you come to the Orthodox Academy?" On that night, when they saw Su Mou's name on the list of applicants, he and Qin Chongxing were both very shocked and somewhat worried. There were also a few students from the Ivy Academies that had transferred here, but they were all students that were not valued. Su Mou was different. He had been the focus of the Li Palace Academy's training for the past 2 years. But in the end, after coming out of the Mausoleum of Books, he did not even greet the Li Palace Academy before coming to the Orthodox Academy. If this matter were to get out, it would definitely provoke some trouble. "I came to hide from trouble." Su Mou had no intention of concealing anything, directly saying, "The storm you caused in the capital is too great. Even in the Mausoleum of Books, I knew about it. If I return to the Li Palace Academy, the arrangements that await me will definitely be to represent the Li Palace Academy in challenging you. I only like reading and cultivating. I don't like doing these things." Chen Chongxing and Tang 36 understood. Daoist Siyuan was one of the Orthodoxy's 6 prefects and the representative of the Orthodoxy's new faction. At the same time, he was also the Li Palace Academy's greatest backer. Bi Tianqin, who was already at the middle level of star condensation, had insisted on challenging the Orthodox Academy in spite of the discussions because his parents were old friends with Daoist Siyuan. If Su Mou returned to the Li Palace Academy, he would definitely not be able to avoid these arrangements. Tang 36 was still somewhat confused. "You don't like fighting, so why did you take the initiative to represent the Orthodox Academy?" Su Mou replied, "Because he's a member of the Bi family." Tang 36 replied, "It's precisely because he's a member of the Bi family that it's rather troublesome to deal with. So I was originally somewhat hesitant. Bullying the weak and fearing the strong is wrong." Su Mou seriously said to him, "That's reasonable." The more Tang 36 looked at him, the more he found him pleasing to the eye, even somewhat admiring. Su Mou added, "And I just said to you, this match should be fought by me." Tang 36 recalled that he truly had said this before. Now that he thought about it, these words truly were rather strange. What did he mean by he should be the one to fight? Why? "Because Bi Tianqin is my cousin." Chapter 484. Tang 36 was quiet for a while, then asked, "Then who is Bi Yanhong?" Su Mou replied, "My uncle." Tang 36 took in a deep breath, then asked, "Wu Qiongbai?" Su Mou thought, is there even a need to ask? Of course it's my aunt. There was a rather awkward silence. Tang 36 looked at him and said, "In the future, can you say something like this a little earlier?" Su Mou replied, "No one has ever asked me. I can't just meet a person and tell them that my uncle is Bi Yanhong." Qin Chongxing nodded. "That's reasonable." Tang 36 glanced at him and said, "I still haven't said that you hid your engagement with Su Yorong from us. Don't be in such a hurry to find some alliance." He then turned to Su Mou and said, "Continue." When Aunt was in the Li Palace Academy, she was like a sister to Archbishop Siyuan, so she naturally stood on his side. Moreover, she's very protective. After all, he was talking about his elder, so Su Mou's expression was rather unnatural. If cousin really did fight with you, no matter who won or lost, it wouldn't be easy to clean up. It would be best if Aunt also came to the capital. Chen Chongxing and Tang 36 glanced at each other, then said in unison, "There's no need. Quickly write a letter to your uncle saying that everything is fine." Su Mou replied, "There's no need. My uncle wrote me a letter." "What? Or else how could I have come out of the Mausoleum of Books?" Su Mou thought of the contents of the letter and felt rather helpless. "Uncle, you're henpecked, but am I not afraid of Aunt?" "Uncle wanted me to enter the Orthodox Academy." He continued, "So I came." At this point, Chen Chongsheng and Tang 36 finally understood the entire matter. Bi Yanghong knew that his wife supported the orthodoxy's new faction. Now that Bi Tianxin was representing the Li Palace Academy and challenging the Orthodox Academy. If he won, the Bi clan would naturally offend the Pope, the Winshui Tangs, and even Su Li and those two saints of White Emperor City. But if he lost, his wife, who was protective of him, might come to the capital and stir up a storm. He did not want this sort of thing to happen. Perhaps it was because he supported the conservative faction of the Orthodoxy, or perhaps it was simply because he did not want to participate in this storm. As a result, he wrote a letter to Su Moyu in the Mausoleum of Books, telling his dearest nephew to leave seclusion early and enter the Orthodox Academy, doing his utmost to make this matter disappear without a trace. It had to be said that Bi Yanghong's method was very wise. When his wife stood on the side of the Orthodoxy's new faction, he had Su Moyu represent him in expressing goodwill to the other side, or at least a desire to calm the situation. In this way, with the status and strength of the two of them, the other clans would probably not be affected by the storm. This was the principle behind the saying that only by staying uninvolved could one stand proudly in the world. But in this way, one point became very obvious. Wu Qiongbai had clearly not asked for his opinion on this matter, or perhaps she had not listened to his advice. The storms of the 8 directions, loving husband and wife, rumored to be a celestial couple, but it turned out they also had their own thoughts. When he thought of this, Qin Changxing couldn't help but feel somewhat sorrowful. Tang 36, on the other hand, was much more direct. He looked at Su Moyu and asked, "Your uncle and aunt don't have a good relationship, do they?" The atmosphere grew cold once more. Su Moyu looked at him in silence. "Pretend I didn't say anything." Tang 36 smiled at him and said, "If that's the case, then you can be considered the young master of the Bi clan. No wonder that fellow looked at you with a strange expression." "That's right. If the young master were to teach his servant a lesson, would he dare to retaliate?" Su Moyu very seriously corrected him. "Even if he used his full strength, I could still defeat him." Then he turned to Qin Changxing and sighed, "You truly are extraordinary." Qin Changxing felt somewhat embarrassed. Tang 36 didn't feel embarrassed. He put his arm around Qin Changxing's shoulder and said, "Your uncle's intention in having you enter Orthodox Academy is now very clear. You've already taught a lesson to a servant today. In 2 days, if your cousin comes to cause trouble again, you better not hide." Su Moyu thought to himself, these are the words, the meaning is also the same, but why is it that everything that comes out of your mouth is always so piercing to the ear? He really didn't know how to respond. Looking at the quiet surroundings of the little building, he asked, "This place is rather quiet. Normal students can't come here. You saw that short wall just now, but of course you're not a normal student. Yesterday, Xian Yuan had already tidied up your room. I'll take you to see it in a moment. How about it? We've given you quite a good treatment, right?" Tang 36 thought of a coincidence and laughed. "You're the young master of the Bi clan. The garden that's separated by the wall is called Bi Garden. Don't you think it's destined that you will be transferred to our Orthodox Academy, and that you will have to live here?" Su Moyu didn't even think about this. He shook his head and said, "We're all students. It's not appropriate for us to enjoy special treatment. He's the principal. I'm the superintendent. Xian Yuan Pa is the manager. Zhixio's position has already been arranged, but his name hasn't been decided yet. Princess Luo Luo is the lifelong honorary vice principal. In short, we're all not normal students. You can name whatever position you want. But I still think we're all young people. Why do we need to be separated by a wall?" "Because Chen Changxing said he likes peace and quiet. I think he has too many secrets and is afraid of being discovered." Hearing this, Chen Changsheng could no longer maintain his silence. He explained to Su Moyu, cultivation requires peace and quiet. If there are any new students that have successfully broken through to ethereal opening, they can also move to Bi Garden. If they can place within the top 3 in the grand examination, they also have the right to move in, according to Tang Tang. It also has a sense of motivation." Hearing this, Su Moyu felt that it was a good idea. He asked, "What's everyone's reaction?" He was used to leading his fellow students at Lee Palace College. Today, upon arriving at Orthodox Academy, he subconsciously began to consider these matters. Tang 36 looked towards the young students that were either sitting or lying on the grassy ground by the lake. He said, "They're all students that came from provinces, counties, or even rural areas, or invisible people that have been neglected by the Ivy Academies for a long time. Being able to pass the preliminary stage of the grand examination makes them want nothing more than to offer sacrifices to the Sea of Stars and worship the Empress. How could they dare hope to place within the top 3 in the grand examination? As for breaking through to ethereal opening, that's even more unthinkable." Therefore, no one paid attention to what we said. They only felt that we were drawing a large cake for them to see. Some even grumbling. Su Moyu thought about how Chen Changsheng had broken through to ethereal opening during the grand examination, shocking the entire continent, then thought about how, after that night at the Mausoleum of Books, ethereal opening seemed to have become a common occurrence. He subconsciously glanced at Tang 36, thinking to himself just how many people had clearly understood what benefits Chen Changsheng had brought to the younger generation of cultivators. Tang 36 looked towards the grassy ground and said, "Actually, I can understand why they think that way, but I still feel that they're useless, so yesterday I gathered them together and gave them a good scolding." Chen Changxing shook his head. He definitely didn't want to experience that again. Even if it was just to recall what had happened the night before, he had never seen anyone curse like Tang 36 in his life. Su Mou strongly disapproved of this teaching philosophy. He shook his head and said, "Cursing people is wrong." I didn't say a single curse word, just like when you stopped us on the Divine Avenue of Lee Palace. The Divine Avenue of Lee Palace. Su Mou was a little emotional. He gave Qin Changshen a look a little apologetic. "I told them last year at this time on the Divine Avenue of Lee Palace, Chen Changsheng told the entire world that he wanted to take first place in the grand examination, and that at that time he hadn't even completed his purification. Everyone thought he was a lunatic. And the result? The result was that he really did what everyone thought was impossible." Tang 36 said, "Then how could anything in this world be truly impossible? What does it matter if it's the top 3 in the grand examination or breaking through to ethereal opening?" Su Mou thought about it and said, "That makes sense." The two escorted Su Mou back to his room, had him rest, and then left. Walking out of the small building, Tang 36 said with absolute certainty, "There's definitely a problem with his uncle and aunt's relationship. If there's a problem, then solve the problem. The 25th is getting closer and closer. I hope I can make the days of 2 chapters last longer, work harder." Chapter 485. You actually still haven't forgotten. Chen Changxing sighed in amazement. That husband and wife are both members of the Storms of the 8 Directions. Who wouldn't be interested in their affairs? In truth, I even suspect that Wu Qiongbai had an affair with Daoist Siyunbak in the Lee Palace Academy. Otherwise, why would she send her own son to fight in Daoist Siyun's place? And why would Bi Yanghong be so vigilant, sending Su Mou into the Orthodox Academy to bear the brunt? Tang 36 walked to the lakeshore and said, "But now that I think about it, that idiot Bi Tianqin is Wu Qiongbai's son, but he's not necessarily Bi Yanghong's son. Do you think he might be Daoist Siyun's son?" Sigh. But this matter involves a private matter, so it can't be spread around, especially if Su Mou hears of it. After all, it's his own uncle. How embarrassing. He turned to his side and realized that there was no one there. At some point, Chen Changsheng had left and was now on the grass on the other side of the wall. Confused, he asked, "What are you doing?" Chen Changsheng didn't even turn his head. Waving his hand, he said, "I'm going to see if the meal is ready." The 3 matches that had begun in the early morning had all concluded very quickly. Lunch had been brought forward, and after eating, there was still time to take a nap. Only when the sun had moved a certain distance from its zenith to the west, and the stifling heat was somewhat relieved, did the gate of the Orthodox Academy open once more. It was still Tang 36 leading the group. The new students of the Orthodox Academy stood behind him on the stone steps, their faces brimming with excitement and unease. Without any surprises, the first student of the Orthodox Academy to fight lost. Just when the opponent's sword was about to descend, Tang 36's voice very promptly rang out, "It ends here." The second match was lost, the third was also lost, and in the following matches, the Orthodox Academy lost very straightforwardly. The usually bustling atmosphere of the arena was now rather oppressive. Only the voices of Tang 36 and the new students of the Orthodox Academy could be heard. "It's about time. I say, it's about time, son. I say, why don't you listen?" These were Tang 36's words. He was speaking to those people who had come to challenge the Orthodox Academy. The words of the new students of the Orthodox Academy were even simpler, not exceeding 5 words. "Concede. I concede. I admit defeat." Only when they reached the gate of the Homecoming Academy and shook off the tension and unfamiliarity from the previous battle did they speak a little more, standing on the stone steps and chatting with their classmates. "Was there a problem with the sword I used just now? Didn't the dean say last night that your opponent's weakness is speed? That's why your sword should be faster. As fast as I can. It means that you haven't practiced the 3 moves of Plum Blossom well enough. Dean, you mentioned that there's another sword technique that can restrain this person. What is it again?" The 3 chants of the Fisherman's Song is a powerful sword technique of the Mount Lee Sword sect. I heard that even Liang Ban, who was unable to grasp it. It is Go Hanshi's ultimate technique. With our current cultivation levels, it is impossible for us to learn it. The new students of the Orthodox Academy discussed. There was no sign of defeat on their faces. Consecutive defeats didn't seem to affect their moods at all. The servant of the bee family was actually right. Swords have no eyes, especially in this kind of battle where the difference in strength was too great. No matter how sharp Tang 36's eyes were, no matter how timely he shouted, it was still unavoidable for some accidents to occur. But that really couldn't be blamed on those experts who challenged the Orthodox Academy. It was basically the result of the new students being too nervous. When dusk began to rise, the Orthodox Academy had already lost 10-odd matches. 6 new students were injured, and 2 of them were rather heavily injured. But these students didn't have any complaints, and they didn't mention Tang 36's promise a few days ago that they wouldn't be affected. On the contrary, they were grateful, because they knew better than anyone else how much progress they had made with Chen Changxing's guidance and such a rare opportunity to fight against experts. Just their horizons were many times broader than before they entered the academy. The duels of the Orthodox Academy that caused a great disturbance in the capital and brought much excitement to the common people finally entered a new stage today. The Orthodox Academy began to lose, but no one believed that they were the losers, because the representatives of the Orthodox Academy were all the new students that had been recruited a few days ago. Of course, there were no victors. The mood of the new students of the Orthodox Academy was very good, and Tang 36 was basically satisfied with the current situation. But seeing this sort of perfunctory battle, the crowd that had come to watch the excitement felt very bored. They were bored to the point of panic, and some people even began to feel sleepy and yawn. The most depressed were the experts from the Tianhai clan and the Ivy Academies. They realized that they had completely become sparring partners, and a few of them had actually slipped up and accidentally injured the new students of the Orthodox Academy. When they thought of the threat Tang 36 had uttered this morning, they even felt somewhat uneasy. Only when they saw that Tang 36's complexion was normal did they relax and bitterly smile as they retreated. Dusk gradually darkened, and the gates of the Orthodox Academy closed. The majority of the priests from the Li Palace returned to their halls, leaving behind only the night watchmen and a squadron of Orthodoxy cavalry. The common people of the capital resentfully returned home to prepare dinner. Under the canopy, the stewards of the 4 great markets looked at today's bets and tightly creased their brows. Those experts that had challenged the Orthodox Academy felt the most inexplicably irritated. After dinner was over, the teachers and students of the Orthodox Academy began to summarize and simultaneously prepare for tomorrow's matches. After everything was done, Qin Changsheng and the others returned to the separate garden. Today, Xian Yuanpa had spent the entire day with the head chef of Clear Lake Restaurant. In his view, the liveliness in the kitchen and the pots and pans, those methods of cooking ingredients that he had never even heard of before, were far more important than the liveliness outside the gate. Only when he was summarizing just now did he understand the situation of today's matches outside the gate. Somewhat confused, he asked, if conceding defeat could solve the problem, why did we need to recruit so many new students? We could just directly concede defeat. Tang 36 said, I see that you've always had a problem with the Orthodox Academy's recruitment of new students. Why? Xian Yuanpa replied, why don't you take a look at the lunch and dinner? Such good dishes were all eaten up by them. See, this is the reason why I did what I did. Tang 36 looked at him and said, because you can afford to lose that person, but I can't. Xian Yuanpa didn't quite understand, but after thinking it over, he understood that this way of speaking was called a double entendre. I'm someone who wants to reach 58 consecutive victories. How can I stop here? Tang 36 finally said. Qin Changxing glanced at him and knew that the matter was definitely not so simple. Chapter 486. In the next few days, the matches in front of the Orthodox Academy continued. The ones representing the Orthodox Academy were still the new students. These new students had already completed their purification. Of course, they could not be said to be completely powerless. But how could they compare to the true experts of the Tianhai family and the Ivy schools? The new students were very clear about their own level. Following Qin Changsheng's instructions, they went on stage and displayed everything they had time to display, experienced everything they wanted to experience, and then conceded. It was a bit like tasting and stopping, but it could also be said that they quit while they were ahead. In short, after 2 or 3 strikes, they would simply concede. This became the most common scene in front of the Orthodox Academy. Until the end, the normal experts of the Tianhai family and the Ivy schools had all won around. Only a few true experts remained. The person who came to the field at this time was a star condensation expert from the temple seminary. He was an ascetic priest. He was originally cultivating his body in the northwest, but he was unexpectedly called back by the 2 Holy Church archbishops. This ascetic priest wore a bamboo hat. Even in the scorching summer weather, he still wore coarse cotton clothing. The shadow of the bamboo hat covered his face, and only his 2 eyes that exuded a harsh aura could be seen. He looked at Tang 36 and said expressionlessly, Today, Principal Chen will probably personally teach you, right? From their titles, it was actually possible to see the true affiliation of the experts who challenged the Orthodox Academy. Those who nominally belonged to the Ivy schools, but in reality were experts of the Tianhai family. They basically all called Qin Changsheng by his name. As for the true experts of the Ivy schools, even if they did not have a good impression of Qin Changsheng, they still had to strictly follow the sacred order of the orthodoxy and respectfully call him principal. My apologies, Principal Qin has used up too much of his mental energy these past few days. He is currently studying in the academy to recover. Tang 36 looked at this famous ascetic priest in Wenshui and smiled. Priest Bei, your eminence's opponent today is someone else. The ascetic priest's gaze pierced through the shadow of the bamboo hat and landed on Tang 36's face. He said solemnly, I heard that Master Tang broke through 3 levels in the Mausoleum of Books. If you can experience it, it will be a worthwhile trip. From the distant northwest to the capital, it truly was a very long journey. From this, one could also see that Dao Siyuan and Ling Haizhuang, these 2 prefects of the orthodoxy, had long ago begun preparing to suppress the Orthodox Academy. His opponent's gaze fell on his face. Tang 36 actually felt a slight pain. He squinted his eyes and thought, An opponent as strong as you, I don't have the confidence to win. Even if I win, I'm afraid I'll be heavily injured. Your opponent is not me, but him. He looked at the ascetic priest and solemnly introduced, he is the student with the greatest talent in cultivation among this batch of students of the Orthodox Academy. Following his hand gesture, a young student walked down the stone steps. That student was indeed very young, too young. It would be more accurate to say that he was a teenager, no more than 13 or 14 years old. His expression was nervous, and his originally lively eyes were now somewhat lifeless. Looking at this youth, the ascetic was stunned and said, "If I am not wrong, this child should have just completed purification." Tang 36 praised. As expected of Priest Bei, who bitterly cultivates and comprehends the Tao, your eyes are truly like torches. Your judgment is not wrong. This child completed purification 3 months ago. This time, he came to the capital in preparation to participate in the preparatory examination of the grand examination to test his luck. The area in front of the Orthodox Academy was no longer as bustling as it was a few days ago, but there were still quite a few people. When they saw the illustrious priest Bei personally appear, they were shocked and in the midst of their discussions. Suddenly, they realized that the opponent that the Orthodox Academy had arranged for Priest Bei was actually this kind of youth. The crowd instantly became incomparably quiet, thinking, just what sort of trick is the Orthodox Academy playing? Your meaning is my opponent is this child? Priest Bei's voice naturally became angry as he harshly rebuked, "You are insulting me." Tang 36's expression did not change as he smiled and said, "Priest's words are incorrect. The purpose of the all-school martial exhibition, besides competing with one another, is also for the seniors to instruct the juniors. This child truly is the most talented new student in our Orthodox Academy. Although he has never sparred with anyone before and is very nervous, he still dares to stand out and ask the seniors to instruct him. How can this be considered an insult?" An extremely powerful qi exuded from the edge of the bamboo hat. Priest Bei forcefully suppressed his anger and said, "Please respect me." Tang 36 slowly restrained his smile and calmly said to him, "Priest's words sound rather familiar, very similar to those officials of the department for purging officials who boast of their integrity." Priest Bei stared into his eyes and harshly rebuked, "You actually compare me to those ruthless officials." "I used to respect, sir, very much." Tang 36 paused, then continued, "But now that sir has returned to the capital, it's truly impossible for me to respect you again." Priest Bei's gaze moved back and forth between him and the Orthodox Academy youth. "You clearly know that I can't do anything to him." Tang 36 said, "Because sir is a gentleman." Priest Bei said, "So you specifically chose this child to deal with me?" Tang 36 didn't deny it, saying, "I won't hide it from sir. The vast majority of the matchups were decided by Chen Chongsheng. Only your match was decided by me." After a moment of silence, Priest Bei sighed and said, "In today's world, is it really the petty people who rule?" Saying this, he turned around and prepared to leave. Tang 36 originally didn't intend to say anything more, but seeing the somewhat desolate back of the famed ascetic priest of the Northwest, he couldn't help but open his mouth. A gentleman can be deceived with methods, but of course this isn't necessarily correct. Although I'm not a gentleman, I'm also not a petty person. But since sir, who was once a gentleman, has been used by a petty person to do ungentlemanly things, then I naturally can only respond in the manner of a petty person." Hearing these words, Priest Bei seemed to be struck by lightning, his body slightly stiffening. After a moment, he once again raised his foot and walked back into the crowd. Seeing the gradually fading figure on the distant street and the increasingly small bamboo hat, Tang 36 was calm and silent. "Remember, this match is our Orthodox Academy's victory." Not waiting for the crowd to boo, he calmly said, "Next." Not every match had a story, and not every story could leave behind a meaningful conclusion. The match in front of the Orthodox Academy continued. Without blood and without the shadow of death, it naturally lost much of its excitement, becoming more and more depressing. To the common people, if there were no such things, no scenes of mountains collapsing and the heavens shattering, the fights of the continent's experts that had stepped into the divine domain would be no different from the fights of those naughty children on the streets. It was just that they were a little stronger. Only those who could understand would be able to understand the information revealed in the battle. Of the new students representing the Orthodox Academy, other than the special circumstances of Suemou and the youth, although the other new students had yet to obtain a single victory and could not even see the possibility of victory, in these extremely short matches, they were often able to display unimaginable sword techniques and transformations. Although everyone knew that this was because they had received Chen Chongsheng's guidance, for these new students to be able to realize it, they had already displayed a certain possibility. These children from the provinces and countryside, these poor students that no one from the Ivy Academies paid any attention to, had suddenly become different. Besides the common people that had come to watch the matches in front of the Orthodox Academy, there were also many teachers and students of the Ivy Academies that had changed into uniforms. They looked at the new students of the Orthodox Academy on the stone steps, not daring to believe their eyes. Was this the incomparably mischievous Wei Chong that they had once taught? Was this the Chu Wenbin that only knew how to sleep every day? Compared to the past, the new students of the Orthodox Academy seemed to have gained a new luster. Crucially, their minds were different. They were confident and calm, as if nothing could stump them. Even the seemingly endless failures were not frightening. They still firmly believed that they would be able to obtain the final victory. When all these things were combined together, they formed a temperament called calmness. Because of calmness, they were calm. Only then could they talk and laugh in front of the crowd, no longer feeling nervous or inferior because of the ridicule or disregard of others. If last year, when Chen Chongsheng became a new student of the Orthodox Academy, then when Luo, Xian Yuan Pa, Tang 36, and Jishio joined the Orthodox Academy one after another, it could be said that the Orthodox Academy was reborn. Just like these young students, or in other words, it was because of their arrival. The change of these young students, of course, originated from the Orthodox Academy. The two most important people were Chen Chongsheng and Tang 36. Putting Tang 36 aside, everyone could see Chen Chongsheng's importance. If it wasn't for his endless guidance every night and the large amount of mental energy spent on studying the techniques and weaknesses of those experts, how could the new students of the Orthodox Academy have the courage to face those experts who were several levels higher than them? How could they have so much confidence? After recruiting new students from the Orthodox Academy, Chen Chongsheng never fought again. He didn't even go to the outside of the academy to take a look, but everyone in the capital knew that he had always been watching the outside from the Orthodox Academy. Through these dozens of matches, he displayed his unimaginable talent in the way of the sword to his heart's content. The kind of talent in the way of the sword was so strong, that kind of talent was so dazzling that the entire capital was once again shaken. Starting from the same moment last summer, he had already brought too much shock to the capital and even the entire human world. The Ivy Festival, the Grand Examination, the Mausoleum of Books, the Garden of Zhou, Sunyang City, many people thought that they were already numb from the shock of Chen Chongsheng. No matter what he did in the future, it wouldn't be surprising. But this time they were still shocked once again. With Chen Chongsheng's age, being able to have such an unfathomable level of cultivation in the way of the sword was something very hard to imagine. What was even harder to imagine was that he could also teach others how to learn the sword. It must be known that this wasn't as simple as teaching a child how to write. Teaching and dispelling doubts, this was a teacher. The current Chen Chongsheng actually had the faint air of a grandmaster. Because his age was truly too young, every time people had this kind of thought, they would shake their heads and deny it. But no one dared to deny that if he was given more time, such as another 10-some years, once he truly matured, Perhaps he really could become the principal of the Orthodox Academy in name and in reality. While everyone's gazes were on the Orthodox Academy, sighing in admiration at Chen Changsheng's cultivation in the way of the sword, only one person remained unconvinced. It's just messing around. Mo gazed at the Empress's back, somewhat bored as she fiddled with the grass ring on her finger. I also don't know why those people in the imperial court and the Li Palace are making such a fuss over nothing. The sentence, "Please respect me," was naturally written, but when I wrote the second sentence, "You're insulting me," I realized that I was very affected by that advertisement. There are still 3 days until the 25th. I will very naturally and earnestly do it. I will probably leave on the 27th.